Are there any council comments or announcements? I'd like to begin by welcoming the members of Boy Scout Troop 33 who are here observing the City Council meetings. Welcome to you all. We're glad to have you. Also like to let everyone know that next Monday, Monday the 12th, we are going to be, prior to the council meeting, we're going to be having a reception to welcome our newest City Council member, Ruben Snipper from Ward 5, who was just elected last week. That will be prior to the council meeting, I believe it's starting at 7, is that right? Starting at 6:45, thank you. And everyone is welcome to come to that. And we'll have the swearing in at the beginning of the next City Council meeting. Are there any other council comments or announcements? Bruce?
Yes. I just wanted to take a minute to put something out there for the council to consider. However long ago it was, quite some time ago now, my partner Jeff Burkhart and I made a contribution toward the community center, particularly earmarked toward some improvements in this room. At the time, we thought it was going to be to maybe build a new dais. As we started to meet after the facilities were available, and we meeting, I mean not the council, but I and some staff and some other people who came in to give us some ideas about what we might do. The scope of the project always seemed to broaden every time we had a meeting, and it never really, we never really got to a point where we could say, well, this is, you know, here's a finite little part of the project that we could do. It's been some time now. The more we got into it, the more issues were opened up and possibilities, and they all became linked. And so I've talked with the city manager, and what I'd like to propose is that the city manager have the ability to put together a RFP and go out and find somebody who can provide a little professional expertise on what might happen in improvements in this room as a more multi-purpose room, stage, auditorium, etc. We've talked about that as a long-term goal. We have some, I believe, $100,000 in the out years in the capital budget, I believe FY09, and I think it would be a good time to find some expertise to bring in to help with that in planning, and now is a good time for it to maybe give us any information we might need for upcoming budget discussions. So I just wanted to put that out there as something that we might want to consider, and I know that the city manager might have a comment or two on that for what might be feasible, and if now is a good time, maybe she can make a comment.
I think as Councilmember Williams indicated, I think at this point, if the council would like to explore this further, I think we do need some technical assistance. I think in recommending that we perhaps issue an RFP for some architectural or other technical services, we're not asking for the council to make a commitment in terms of actually funding this project, but I think if the council has any interest, we at least need some assistance in exploring it. The only direction that I need this evening is whether the council has enough interest for us to even issue an RFP. Obviously, like any other contract, this would come back before the council for your consideration.
Jerry.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. I just concerned about the process here. We're talking about issuing an RFP for something that this council hasn't even talked about as far as what the need or the goal is. And you know, the last that we talked here at the council was, you know, could we knock down this podium so that we could have a stage that could be used for community events, community performances, use this room as a auditorium and theater, and have some portable dais that we could use for council meetings and the one night a week that we meet. And I guess I have an opinion that you know, we have a stage now that we could be using if this table wasn't here. But I think the process is a concern that we're moving ahead and deciding about whether or not we're going to do an RFP when we haven't even had the discussion yet as to what the need is or what the community desire is.
I think that's a good comment, and I would be happy to schedule a discussion of this as soon as we can do that. I know Bruce has had some discussions, and he's had some discussions with staff about some of the problems with doing what the council originally thought we were going to do, and it's gotten more complicated by a factor of several. And I think that it would be appropriate to have that discussion and then decide if that would be the appropriate way to proceed. Personally, I think Bruce has a good idea, but I can understand how other council members who may not have been involved in the discussions might want an update.
A couple of things. I wanted the council to know that on last week's Montgomery College Neighbors Advisory Committee, they decided on their plan for the coming year and some of the topics that they feel are most important to cover. The council, I believe, is scheduled to hear about that on, is it February 20th or February 26th?
Well, we're setting some tentative dates, but I actually have not had an opportunity to sit down with staff since I got that information. So
Okay.
I'm having my usual Tuesday meeting with staff following the council meeting, and it is my intention to try and put that on as soon as we can do it.
Okay, very good. Some of the issues will be better fleshed out by then. We'll have a draft resolution, and some of the follow-up that the committee members wanted to take care of will have been done. But the gist of it is they have some ideas that they want to make sure the council reviews and takes action on before they're in contact with any other officials. And this pertains to Montgomery College and their redevelopment of their existing buildings, as well as any expansion possibilities. So I appreciate the mayor getting that on an upcoming agenda as soon as possible so that it will facilitate discussion with those state and county officials before opportunities are fewer. The other thing I wanted people to know about is in our city, we have the new Montgomery chapter leader of the Sierra Club, David Hauk, and I was lucky to sit down with him this weekend and with a couple of environmental advisors, and he has some very good ideas about energy efficiency and things that the city can do, as well as things residents can do, and hopefully they will be more likely to do that if they see the city government involved in such positive initiatives. So I hope that, I believe the mayor is going to meet with him as well this week, and I hope that we can shortly discuss that topic as well. It kind of ties together many things that we've been getting piecemeal. Some that come to mind are the National Wildlife Foundation, natural habitat designations for both residents and the city. Some of the green building discussion. I know the city is holding a green building conference in the month of February. We always have Arbor Day. We talk about Rachel Carson Day, and eliminating pesticides from the environment. And a lot of those, I think, can be kind of looked at in a comprehensive way over time instead of in that piecemeal way. So I'm excited with the people that are getting their initiatives in line, and then hopefully we can link them all so that it will be as big an impact as possible in our community and our region. The other issue, I'd like to make sure the city manager is aware of the Safe Tacoma initiative. It looks like may have gotten the promised funding from DC, and I'm very eager for this to go forward with the hiring of a coordinator That's certainly what's needed. We've kind of got a floundering initiative here, and I want to make sure it stays on track, especially as we go into budget discussions for next year. There's no reason for this to be left out. And I think we're a little bit maybe hesitant to get it underway before Chief Rakucci comes on, but I do want to make sure that as soon as he is here, that it is something that we take fast action on and show some positive results.
I'm tentatively scheduled to meet with Seth Grimes later this week. I think as Councilmember Austin Lane at least is aware, he is the president of the citizens group that formed. I think the mayor has tentatively scheduled a work session for February 26th, I believe. I think the issue up until now has been the uncertainty of funding from D.C., and I received the same email, I believe you did, Councilmember Austin Lane, indicating that there may have been a breakthrough on that front within the last week or so.
Do you think at the time that we have that work session that we'll be looking at position description for the coordinator as well as any hiring notices that need to go out?
I think one of the issues that we can talk about is what are the best ways to proceed to make sure that whatever program we put in place is going to meet the council's objectives. Like I say, Mr. Grimes and I will likely be meeting this week to kind of kick around some ideas.
Well, given that it's modeled off of CSAFE, I consider that the design, the plan. And they have a coordinator, they have a community outreach person, and I hope to see us undertake that same plan in short order. The last thing I would like to brief the council about is the metro development issue. And I know that because of GEM feasibility discussions and workshops that the city is proposing, that it's taking a little bit longer to set a walkthrough date. I'm happy to go ahead and put forward some dates in March. If the council doesn't object, I would like to start contacting people and making sure that the key players are able to attend. And I'm thinking that probably a Saturday is a day when most people could come, but I'm open to input on that. But I do want to make sure that we have a date targeted, and then as time is freed up, I know that we'll get good city support on this.
You know what I think would be useful? Why don't you and I sit down and talk about that with a couple of the city staff, just to make sure that everybody's sort of headed in the same direction. I think that would be useful to do, and I'd be happy to set up a meeting at your convenience.
I'm sorry, was that about the council walk?
No, about having people go to the metro location and take a look at the proposals that have been made and the concerns that the city has about the impact on transit, on the buses.
Right. You may recall that when the WMATA had their compact hearing, which was in October, that we designated the walkthrough of the metro property as the very next thing that needed to happen. And certainly we had holidays and now the new year, but time's a-wasting. I really feel that getting a date on the calendar is the follow-through that's needed right now, and I'm willing to do that work if there are no other hands to make those calls. It really is important, and I don't want to lose any opportunity to succeed on the Metro Development Project.
I'd be happy to sit down and talk with you, as soon as you want to do that.
Okay. And then the other thing on the Metro Development is that I believe the council needs to start thinking about what state resources could be brought to bear to this regional piece of property. I know that it is in D.C. and it's somewhat difficult, but I think if the state of Maryland were willing to offer some type of assistance to redevelop the site in a way that is compatible with both D.C. and Maryland residents, that it would go a long way towards getting us what we are looking for there. And I think mainly what everyone is looking for is an alternative design. I don't know which design, but I would like it decided that an alternative design is preferable by the Metro agency instead of the one that's on the table. And want to make sure that the council is thinking about that idea, and before we approach any state officials behind that idea, but I do want to make sure that that is an opportunity that we avail ourselves of.
Terry?
Thank you, Mayor Porter. The reason I was somewhat confused by Councilmember Austin Lane's discussion of the walking to the metro site and walk through the metro site is I've been focused on the council walks that we have talked about having here in each of our wards, 3 in each year, I think was what we had discussed doing. Anyways, the residents of Ward 4 have been talking about having the council walk in the ward, and have actually started to plan an event so that at the end of the walk, council members could meet some more of the Ward 4 residents. And I was just trying to get a commitment from the council that we might be able to do that on Saturday, May 5th.
I believe you put that date out to the rest of the council, and I don't think you heard anybody say they couldn't make it.
No, I was looking for an affirmative from
Okay.
people.
I mean,
I'll put it on the calendar.
as long as it's not Mother's Day weekend, which would be a problem.
And no, I already tried that when it didn't float. Okay,
I'm not seeing anybody saying no.
so we have consensus. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, any other comments? Okay. Let's move on to the next item, which is our public comment period. This is the time set aside on the agenda for comments on any of the items on the agenda, of which we have one very long discussion this evening, or anything else you'd like to bring to the council. And I'd ask when you come up to the microphone that you identify yourself and also that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. And,
My name's Chad Loveless.
and I,
20 Maple Avenue. Yep, and
Okay,
one
Pat?
thing I'd like to do is, I was here a couple of weeks ago and my backbone gave out again, which was extremely painful, and I'd like to apologize if I used any words that was not becoming of a peace activist. I'd like to apologize if I used any bad language. Also, second thing, I'd like to congratulate Joy Austin Lane on her marathon she gave. While she was running a marathon, I was down at the peace demonstration. We had a really successful time, and we showed that you also vote with your feet, instead of and also with your ballot. It's very important that we come out here and speak out against this war, because Bush is about to go into Iraq and Iran, and who knows where he's going to go from there. We're also putting pressure on Lockheed Martin, holding them responsible for the cluster bombs that the government of Israel had dropped on the people of Lebanon. And we'd like to hold Lockheed Martin responsible for that, so we're going to be having several upcoming demonstrations on that too. The third thing I would like to ask the City Council is, on the way over here tonight, I've noticed what 18 degrees above zero feels like. It doesn't feel very good. I'd like to know if we got any provisions whatsoever with the police, with the city, to help with the homeless, getting them off the streets. Getting them into shelters, into homes or something. Because I don't think it'd be take very long for a tragedy to happen, in this kind of brutal cold temperatures we're having, and which we're going to have for quite some time. I'd like to ask the city if there's anything they can do to get the homeless, the alcoholics, the addicts, and whatever, off the streets so that they don't have to suffer this. And anybody who's out there, I'd like them, when next time they go out tonight, or even if they can, to step out and feel what 18 degrees above zero feels like, and then think to themselves about rent stabilization, about what the low income are going to be going through. It could be them out there. It could be their grandmothers out there. But what we can do to prevent a horrible human tragedy from happening, because as this city goes more and more into condominiums, more and more people are going to be going homeless. And I think everybody should step out there tonight and feel what it feels like out there. And think about, what if they had no place to go back into tonight? What if they had no place to sleep? And I'd like to ask them, is there any way the police can bring the homeless in, bring them into the hospital? Can we open up the community center for the people who have no place to sleep tonight? so they don't have to face those brutal temperatures. Those temperatures are so cold that they can freeze people solid in no time flat. And it really is not, I don't think our city wants that to happen to any of its residents or anyone who happens to be in our city. And I'd like to see what we can do to prevent that from happening to another, because that is not what Tacoma Park stands for. Let's try to bring the homeless in. Let's try to have compassion. Tacoma Park, I feel, can solve the problem if we all get together. Because 18 degrees is nothing. No human being should have to face alone with no place to go. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you for your concern. My understanding is that when we've dealt with people who are homeless because of evictions or something, I believe our housing department deals with it on a case-by-case basis. And we do, in fact, have an agreement. I don't believe so. I think. Well, I think if there were an emergency like that, I think calling the police would be the appropriate thing to do. And I know that we have a agreement with Adventist Community Service, which also helps people who are in emergency situations. And I'm assuming that if there were some kind of an emergency with someone who was in a very difficult situation, I think calling the police would be the appropriate thing to do.
Can we provide that number?
We need to get the word out to the
Yeah, the police department's number is 301-270-1100.
Yeah.
And so that would be an appropriate, if you do know of someone who's in that kind of situation, that would be an appropriate thing to do.
Do they check the parks and stuff to make sure that no one's out there sleeping and stuff, dying of the cold?
The park police are in charge of the parks, and I would assume that in a situation like this, they probably have some way of making sure that people aren't there.
That's great, because I think, we've got to get the word out to the public, because we haven't experienced this kind of brutal temperature.
Yes, it is very cold. I know. Thank
It's
you.
18 degrees out right now when I came over here.
Yes, quite cold. Thank you, Pat.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else like to speak?
I'm Howard Cohn. This is just to add a little bit to the record. As Bruce mentioned, a group of some reps from the Recreation Committee and from the Arts and Humanities Commission have been meeting about upgrading this room, and we've been doing it for the better part of a year, and we've reached the point where we need professional help. Well, maybe we needed it all along. But, I just want to say this: it's akin to the gym project, and I agree you need to discuss this among yourselves before you go forward. I just want to say we've talked about it a lot. There are some pretty basic options that you're going to need to decide among: portable dais, permanent dais, carpeting, wood, extension, portable extension, permanent extension, ramp, lift for ADA. But I think a professional designer who lays that out and tells you how much it's going to cost and what the consequences are, pros and cons for these options are going to advance your discussion a lot faster than just sort of talking in circles. Anyway, that's the conclusion we've reached. So I endorse the idea of going ahead and getting professional help. Thanks.
And I hope Howard and you and some of the other folks will be part of our council discussions, so
Yeah,
you can
we'll come
give us
back
a little
and
bit of sense of history and
Right.
answer some of the questions about how things got more complicated and what you realized along the way.
Yeah, and along with just sort of members of those committees, we've invited in the local experts, House of Musical Traditions, Kinetic Artistry, so forth and so on. So they can come and help as well if you want to. Depends how long a discussion you want to have, I guess.
Well, we'll try and figure out what would be most helpful to the council, and I just should have said this earlier, but I very much appreciate Bruce's spending as much time as I know he has spent working on this. And I think we're going to have to educate ourselves in, a short discussion is much more quickly than and absorb all that information that he's sort of picked up through trial and error over quite a long time. And I'm not planning to get to the level of expertise that Bruce is at in terms of this issue anyway. I'm not going to do that. So thank you. Anyone else? Okay. We'll move on to the next item, which is the comments and update from the city manager.
Just a few comments this evening. I want to take this opportunity to remind the public that we will be holding some public workshops on the proposed construction of a gymnasium on the site. Those workshops will be held on Saturday, February 10th and Sunday, February 11th. They will be identical workshops, so they're certainly welcome to go to both, but we'd certainly encourage everyone to make at least one of those. And they will be held from 2:30 to 4:30 p.m. And it will begin promptly at 2:30 with a brief presentation to sort of kick off the workshop. The Saturday event will be held at Grace United Methodist Church located on New Hampshire Avenue, and the Sunday workshop will take place at this building. As I had mentioned to the council, I think in prior email correspondence, in talking to staff about this, we did think it would be beneficial to have someone help us figure out the best way that we could structure the forum to make sure we got the result that we were looking for, which is certainly the community's input on a wide variety of options. And I have retained the services of a facilitator, Don Edwards, to kind of work with staff on that process. Mr. Edwards is here this evening. I don't want to take a lot of time because I know you have a very busy agenda, but I would like to just have him maybe step up to the microphone, introduce himself, and maybe just briefly touch on his background and maybe make some general comments about the forums this weekend.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Barbara, Mayor Porter, and members of the council. I'm the president and principal of Justice and Sustainability Associates. We primarily do process design, facilitation, mediation, agenda setting, and consensus building around land use decision making. A lot of my clients are basically planning departments, transportation departments, and we think that we have come up with a design for the workshops that you want to see happen this weekend. Briefly, in order to make sure that we create an objective climate for you to take away some guidance, we're going to present alternatives, basically the rear of the building alternatives and the Grand Avenue alternatives. And they're going to be presented in such a way that participants at the workshops will be walked through a brief presentation for clarification, not for the expression of more opinions about what they're in favor of or not in favor of, but really to clarify what the difference between the alternatives are. We're then going to use a questionnaire that we're going to ask participants to fill out, which allows us to capture, one, their preferences, which alternatives do they like, and the questionnaire will be designed in such a way that they can walk through both sets of alternatives and make some logical choices. And then the second point of the questionnaire is to actually try and get some guidance on the trade-offs that they're willing to accept, not only financial trade-offs, but time trade-offs, other kinds of trade-offs. With that information, we hope to be able to provide to you something that would give you a much more narrower set of guidance by which to make the decision about how to move forward on this particular parcel. So ultimately, this workshop is going to provide an opportunity for people to get more information about the alternatives, to really understand the preferences, and they will have some commonalities but also some distinctions, but more importantly, to understand the trade-offs, because ultimately in these kinds of decisions, it's what is the public willing to absorb in the way of trade-offs that's the most important guidance. I will stop there. If you have some questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you. I'm not sure, but maybe you can speak to it. It sounds from the way you described it that the forum starts with a baseline assumption that there will be a gym. Is that true, or could maybe you clarify that for us?
I think what we were going to do as a baseline is present the information, the data that your technical consultants presented, looking at different approaches to the construction and financing. I don't think it starts with the assumption at all that there will be a gym. It simply answers the question, if there were to be a gym, how might it be approached?
Okay, thank you.
The flyer that went out, though, asked the question, isn't the title of the flyer, "Should the city build a gymnasium"? Isn't that the title of the flyer?
I don't remember.
That's the title of the email I got from Suzanne Ludlow, I think.
Well, I think I don't remember the exact title, Councilmember Clay. I think when Ms. Ludlow and Mr. Edwards and I were discussing this, as we see it, there's sort of three groupings of options. One is certainly a no-gym alternative, and I think as we talked about how we could set up different stations, if you will, for people to move through and to get information, one of those options is very clearly not to build a gym at all. The other two groupings, as we saw it, was if the city were to move forward with the gym, there's a variety of alternatives basically on the Grant Avenue side. There are also a variety of alternatives for the rear parking lot. So those are sort of the three groupings as we saw it. I think as Mr. Edwards indicated, what we envisioned kind of starting this off is to make sure that participants in the forum sort of have a common baseline of knowledge in terms of what were the results of the feasibility study. It would probably be a pared-down version of the presentation that the council received. I believe it was back in early December. And then I think the council had the opportunity to review the draft mailer, which will basically be sent to all city households. They should receive it within the next few days. But I think there was certainly no presumption on the part of staff that there has been a decision made to move forward with the gym.
Thank you for that clarification. The no-build alternative I should have mentioned, but clearly in order to present that level playing field of choices, that no-build alternative would have to be included, and it will be.
Are there other questions? Well, thank you. I appreciate that information.
Thank you all.
The last thing I just wanted to...
Could I just add one thing? Since we're having a Grace Methodist Church, I live over in that side of the city. I know it's sometimes difficult for people to find parking. If people want to know how to park, you have to drive past the church, and then behind the church, there's a driveway that goes. You can't see where you're going when you start off. That's why I mention it. You go around into the back of the church, and that's where the parking is. But it's not visible until you've driven past the church and then come around in the back. So if you're looking for parking, the church does have a great deal of parking, but it's not visible. Sometimes people go around and around looking for parking. So I just wanted to mention that also.
The last thing I just wanted to mention relative to the workshops, as I just indicated, there will be a flyer that will be an informational mailing that will go out to all households, should be arriving within the next few days. One of the things that we did include in the mailer, and it's certainly not mandatory, but if someone, any of our residents do know they plan to attend, it would be helpful if they could let us know that in advance so we have a sense of how many folks to plan for. Basically, they can, if they'd like to sort of register in advance, if you will, there's two ways to let us know. One is to call the general city number, which is 301-891-7100. The other is we have set up a special email address, which is jim@tacomagov.org, where folks can either send questions or just indicate that they do plan to attend one of the workshops.
But I assume that if someone decides at the last minute that they'd like to show up, they should come anyway.
We are more interested in having folks show up than we are whether or not we know they're coming in advance. Thank you, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you.
The other thing, just the last thing I wanted to report relative to the community center, is just to comment on an article that appeared in last week's issue of the Gazette, which was titled "Work Repairs on Community Center Top $330,000." As I advised the council and just wanted to take this opportunity to comment publicly on this, I had serious concerns that this article did not really provide a complete picture of the project. I have discussed those concerns both with the reporter who wrote the article as well as the managing editor at the Gazette, both of whom were very apologetic about any misunderstanding and certainly expressed a strong willingness to work with the city in terms of correcting any misimpressions. I have sent a letter to the editor, sent to the Gazette on Friday, and asked that it be published in full. It has been posted on the city's website and has been distributed to the council this evening. The major point that I wanted to make this evening is there are certainly Some items that we are still waiting for the contractor for Phase 1 to address. These items are basically put on a document, what is referred to as a punch list, and those will be either items that we did not feel were put in fully to the standard we expect, or in some cases perhaps were missing or not done at all. These range from very minor issues such as dents in ceiling grates to perhaps some issues that have been of more concern that we have talked about publicly, such as concerns about cracks in the flooring in the public safety plaza level of this building, which is the police lobby, basically. What I wanted to assure the public is that basically by contract, it is the contractor who is responsible for correcting or replacing any of these items. As is customary with any construction project, there are monies that are withheld from each payment that was made to the contractor. The term that you may have heard me use during financial reports is retainage. Those monies are basically held by the city and set aside by contract to ensure that the city gets the work that it contracted for. And in the event that the contractor does not perform those tasks, that the city has sufficient funding to basically hire someone to do that. My primary concern as I read the article was that there may be a misimpression on the part of residents in the community that somehow the city is on the hook financially for making sure these issues get addressed, and that is certainly not the case. The article also made some references to some items that were the subject of negotiation between the city and the contractor for Phase 1, who is not construction. And there's sort of a mixing of apples and oranges, if you will, between issues that are related to the punch list, which is items that basically remain to be resolved by the contractor, and items that have already been completed. Those items that have been completed basically will be dealt with through a process that is known as proposed change orders. These are items where there may have been a disagreement of opinion as the construction went on, whether the contractor was entitled to any additional compensation or not. The actual numbers that were used in the article were actually correct, but there was sort of a mixing of the timing of the work, and they were referred to as pending work, which once again is not the case. The last major point that I addressed in my letter to the editor of the Gazette had to do with the Phase 2 construction. There was some kind of misleading information in terms of the phasing of that portion of the project, and my concern was that perhaps it left a misimpression concerning the work of the contractor on that phase, which was TRG Construction. TRG Construction actually started Phase 2 in October of 2005, and what Phase 2 entailed was basically the renovation of the existing space off the rear parking lot into the community space, the teen room, the game room, the dance room, and an additional meeting room. The article sort of left the impression that they were behind on the whole project. That is not the case. They actually completed the initial work that they were contracted to perform on time, and those facilities opened in June of 2006. Shortly before their initial contract ended, the city approached TRG and asked them to extend the scope of their contract by putting in an elevator on the Maple Avenue side of the building. That work was scheduled to be done in December by contract. There have been some delays, and that is the only portion of the work on Phase 2 or through TRG that was not done on time. As was correctly reported in the article, they will be assessed a monetary penalty for not finishing the elevator installation on time. Like I say, once again, I would like to express my appreciation to everyone at the Gazette for their willingness to basically listen to the city's concern, and I think to respond very positively to that. If there are any questions that any residents may have about the construction, please feel free to call me personally to discuss those. My number is 301-891-7268. Unrelated to the community center, there were just about 2 items that I just wanted to mention very briefly. I know we're running a little bit behind schedule. The council may recall that last year you authorized the filing of a grant application for Safe Routes to School, and the council has spent some time basically sorting through projects. You may recall that we were expecting to hear something back on our application in January of this year. That process has actually been delayed through SHA. We are not expecting to hear anything until March. So certainly as soon as we hear anything back on the grant application, I'll be sure to let the council know, but I didn't want you to think it was just kind of hanging from the staff's part. Councilmember Austin Lane, did you have a question?
No,
Okay.
I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Oh, okay.
On the safe routes to school.
Okay. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention was that there will be a workshop on February 22nd regarding the Erie Flower Commercial Area Master Plan. As part of the council priority on development, the council asked that basically staff meet with residents in various areas of the city to basically review the current commercial area plans in the master plan for the city. This will be the first workshop that we hold in accordance with the council's direction, and it will focus basically on the Erie Flower Commercial Corridor. Our new council member, Reuben Snipper, has agreed to kind of welcome everyone to the session and to sort of kick it off. It will be sort of one of his first official functions, I guess, in his new role. The workshop will be held in the Columbia Room at Wilkinson Hall at Columbia Union College, and it will get underway at 6:30 and last for about 2 hours. So certainly we encourage everyone to attend if they're able to. That concludes my report, unless there's any questions from the council about anything.
Are there any questions for the city manager?
Can you repeat the date of that?
Sure.
Erie
Councilmember.
Flower?
Yeah, it is February 22nd from 6:30 to 8:30 in the evening.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Yes, Barb, I'm always surprised when I walk into the community center. There's always something new and different. And as I walked in this evening on the left, I saw a remarkable green door. It appears to be the new elevator cab installed. Could you give us an update on
Yeah,
that?
it is still under construction. I was very pleased to see that there was actually exterior doors to the elevator. That was sort of a last week development. The current schedule is that the elevator should be completed by mid-February, so we've got our fingers crossed that there are no problems that develop and it will be available soon for the public.
Right, and that, of course, will solve the sort of Winchester Mystery House feel of the place as you walk in, because you won't have to then do a double take to find the stairway to the second floor.
Right.
Just simply press the button,
That's
and the
correct.
doors will open, hopefully.
Got my fingers crossed as well.
Correct.
Any other questions for the city manager? Thank you, Bob. We have one very large work session discussion this evening. Since the main part of the community center has been open, well, two parts. The most recent part opened about 6 months ago. The city manager and I decided this was an appropriate time for the council to get an update on the operations and the use of both the community center part of it, the recreation part of it, and the computer learning center. And so tonight we're going to do a complete review and update of the facilities and their use and the programming, as well as review some of the policy decisions that the council's made related to that space, and sort of give the members of the council an opportunity to get all that information up to date and to voice any concerns, questions that they have about anything having to do with the operations or the use of the space. So the city manager has suggested that we break it into two parts, well, actually 3 parts, one of which will happen immediately, and then when that's completed, we will do a short break and then take up parts 2 and 3. Barb?
Yeah, what I'd like to start off with this evening is to focus on the Computer Learning Center, as well as the just use of public access computers in the city generally, because they're not only found in the Computer Learning Center, but also in the library. Basically, we're going to have 2 presentations tonight by 2 staff people. Ellen Arnold Robbins, our library director, and Rebecca Brown from the library staff are here. They will be doing a slide presentation, so if I can ask the council to maybe move to the audience chairs after they finish their presentation. What I'd like to do is basically give the council an opportunity to comment on the presentation, ask any questions before we move on to the next presentation, which will be by our Recreation Director, Deborah Hadovan.
You can just press space bar.
Okay, can you, that's a little better. Okay, can everybody see it now? We would just like to make a very short presentation, sort of bringing you up to... Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Ellen Robbins, Ellen Arnold Robbins, the library director, and I'm here with Rebecca Brown, the library's public service coordinator, who's also the coordinator of the public access computers in both the computer center and the library. We would like to make a short presentation, sort of bringing you up to date on current operations of the public access computers in the computer center, comprised of rooms A, B, and the senior room, and also the library. First of all, room A is, this is basically how they're configured. Room A has staff help available virtually all of the time that it's open. We allow some talking there. That's where the assistance and, one-on-one teaching takes place. We allow talking and cell phone use and small groups as well. Right now, those groups are pretty much limited to 2 people. During the hours of 3 to 6, kids work in room A where they can talk. We also have sign-in, and we check for library cards there to help keep order. But most of our staff time is definitely focused in room A when it's open. Room B and the library offer little staff help. They're considered quiet rooms, and they're primarily for people who don't need help by and large, who just want to go in and do their work. One workstation in room B is a 30-minute station for people who just want to do a quick email and leave. The senior room, which is actually overall under the jurisdiction of the recreation department. The library sort of takes care of the computers there, but there is no staff oversight or help in the senior room either. It is limited to people over 50 years of age. People there do have longer sessions. Seniors have 2-hour sessions, plus they can log on for an additional 2 hours. Adults in the other rooms have 2 hours, and kids are limited to 1 hour. Yeah, I'm sorry, and I'm having trouble seeing up this one. Get rid of that. Put this, and then we'll go to the next one. Sorry about that. Okay, this slide sort of gives you an idea of the evolution of the public access computers to the present time, beginning in August of 2004, when the library had 4 computer workstations, going to the completion of the first phase of the the community center in December 2005. At that point, we had 1 30-hour staff person in room A, where there are 10 workstations. And, going on through till the completion of the second phase of the community center in June of 2006. At that point, all the rooms were open, rooms A and B, and the senior room, and the hours were increased to 50 hours a week. So we had our full complement of rooms and hours.
prior to that, we didn't want to have staff in the computer center when the library was closed because they didn't have access to restrooms or security. So that was partially the cause of the delay. But what you see for June 2006 is the present, 50 hours of operation per week. This shows you the computer center hours of operation. Currently, 50 hours. That's Monday through Friday from noon to 8, Saturday from noon to 6, and Sunday from 2 to 6. The staffing involves one 30-hour position working Monday through Friday, noon to 6, a 10-hour person who works Monday through Friday from 6 to 8, and another 10-hour person who works Saturday noon to 6 and Sunday 2 to 6. Note that there is never more than one staff person on duty for each hour of operation. In fact, when the 30-hour weekday person goes to lunch, someone comes in from the library and relieves that person. This next slide shows sort of a distribution of the sessions during the week for all the public access computers. In this graph, a session is actually a login and logout sequence. It shows us basically the time of day when the computers are most heavily used overall. It does include library station use, which is why you see the hours from 10 to 12 up at the top. And then you notice there's, of course, a spike when the computer center opens at 12. The busiest hours are during the late afternoon, as you can see, between really about 2:30 and 5 or 6, coinciding with the times when kids are out of school.
The busy period between I should use it? Okay, it's not just kids. For adults also seem to peak in that 3 to 6 period for whatever reason. And and then you start seeing this fall off after 4 o'clock, and it goes down continuously. And there's also, you can see a pent-up need at 12. You can see that people are on 4 stations in the library. Suddenly next door opens and people flood in. So.
This slide shows public access computers utilization during a 6-month period from July through December of 2006. There was a total of 20,582 sessions, 12,273 hours of use overall. And that does include rooms A and B, the senior room, and the library. This next slide shows a variation in location. It really is showing the average session length per workstation, and shows that in the library the average session length was 33 minutes, the same in room A. Room B, the average session length was 41 minutes, and in the senior room it was the longest at 49 minutes. You did this slide. Would you like to add anything?
I think this is because people who are using room B and the senior room are doing something very different on the computers. They're constructing resumes, they're writing papers, they're doing some kind of in-depth research. People in the library in room A are more apt to be doing email, some short answer type things, a quick visit to MySpace, something like that. So I think it reflects a very different sort of activity that's going on in these rooms.
Thank you. Also, I don't think I mentioned this is for a 6-month period as well. Here are some snapshots of the computer center, all of which were taken in a 4-minute period from 4:37 to 4:41 on January 30th. We're showing you a few. We actually took more slides and we tried to sort of extract one that showed activity in each of the rooms. There's the senior room. Room B, the smaller quiet room. This is room A. We have learned some things in this first year of operation that we believe have contributed to the success overall of public computers, particularly in the community center. The overall environment is extremely important in terms of how well the rooms function. We've tried to develop that idea in a number of different ways. First of all, we have rugs and we have posters, which create a welcoming, warm, and inviting atmosphere. We've tried to establish well-defined policies which allow all users to make use of the facility and to apply them equitably and to carry them out. The current staffing level, that is one person at each open hour, is sometimes insufficient to provide the full range of oversight and assistance that's needed, particularly in those peak times you saw in the first graph during the after school hours, where one person is trying to provide one-on-one assistance on the one hand, and at the other hand trying to sort of help establish order by checking library cards, having people sign in, intervening when there's too much noise, and at times when people have to be asked to leave because they're noisy or unresponsive. All of those things are really hard for one person to do at the same time. And that's where we've seen the stress, and that's where we feel there's the greatest need for an increase in assistance. If we had the opportunity to increase staffing, we would do so by having an additional staff person present during those peak hours on weekdays, say from 3 to 6. The cost of this could range between, or would range between $14,385 to $27,552. And the difference in those costs, the first represents an additional 15-hour person, and the second would represent 15 additional hours for an existing staff person for a total of 25 hours, which would then include benefits. Therefore, it is greater cost. That's the end of the slide presentation. Are there any questions I can respond to? Okay.
Well, thank you very much for that very informative presentation. There's a lot of good information here.
Would you like to come? Would you like to sit down here?
Sure, that would be a good idea. And then just put the mic, yeah, the staff can do that. I appreciate that. That was good information and very helpful. I had a question. A lot of the statistics were for the whole 6-month period. I wouldn't be surprised to see an increase, and actually sometimes when I'm here in the afternoon, I'll just drop by the computer center. And it seems to me, my own observation has been that there's been an increase in the number of people over that 6-month period. So that, really, it's been pretty level? So you don't think that there's been more people using it recently than, say, when you first got all the computers in there?
No, but we may have fewer people who are novelty seekers who are using it because it's new, and more people who are using it because they need to use it. I mean, the purposes may be different, that may level out, but it's been a very high level all along. I mean, there are times when people cannot get stations and sit around and wait till something opens up.
Yeah, if you look at it from month to month, sometimes it goes up a little and sometimes it goes down a little, but there's no dramatic progression upwards.
Okay.
A capacity.
Since we opened all the rooms.
Yeah, there's a capacity limitation.
Right, I do
So,
understand that.
I think that's basically why it's leveled out.
Okay.
They're not always in use all the time, but at the peak hours, it can be pretty full. You saw in the pictures.
Yeah.
And there are times when people are waiting to use them. They may come back to the library and they may have to wait for either one, so.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. Are there other questions? Gary?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and for the good job on running the computer center. I stop by there frequently and just see how things are going, and it always seems to be very smooth. People seem to be using the computers, seem to be sometimes not just computers in the senior room, see people playing Scrabble and other board games or cards. So I think it's a nice facility, and I appreciate your oversight of that. There was one slide in the packet that you handed out that showed number of logins per hour, or I forget exactly. Can I borrow your presentation for this one? It was number of sessions and hours of use. And it said 20,582 sessions and 12,273 hours of use.
Right.
I wasn't sure that I understood that slide correctly. It's this slide here, Rebecca.
Oh, that one, yes.
Yeah. Is that saying that we only have 20,000 sessions in 12,000 hours?
Yeah, because the average is 35 minutes a session or something like that.
Okay.
So you have more sessions than you have hours, because most people, if everybody stayed on for 1 hour, you would have the same number of sessions and hours. But
I see.
Huh?
Okay.
But some people stay on longer than an hour, and many
All
people
right.
stay on much less, so they're...
Struggling with that slide. One of our goals, I think, is to provide this service to anybody who needs it, especially those who can't afford their own home computer, and so they use this facility. I wonder if you've given any thought to how we can increase the usage there. I know you look at hours of use and say that the greatest number of hours is during the peak period. Have you measured, for example, how many times that there are no computers available?
It would be hard to measure.
Oh, well, do you measure when you have a peak? In other words, when there's a session on every computer, then obviously there might be need for more computers if that happens a lot or all the time.
Only anecdotally, that statistic is not given to me. It would take me many hours of going through raw usage logs to extract that. Anecdotally, yeah, I worked there a week ago Saturday, and ended up going over and moving chairs into the rotunda area because there were no computers available. This was on a Saturday afternoon, about 2 o'clock. So even at times that are not 3 to 6 on weekdays, you have a demand for these things.
Okay. And I guess, again, my interest is because it is, and anecdotally, the information that I get back from the community is that this is such a valuable resource, and they appreciate it so much. And I'm trying to think if there is some need, aside from increasing staffing, is there a need for additional computer time? And that can be solved by, I think, of 2 different ways. One, extending the number of hours, but the other is to add more computers.
Well, we don't have space for more computers without cramping people. I mean, there's an atmosphere we're trying to get, which is pleasant. You don't want to be sitting in like an airline, but extending hours, if you can, that graph that was the blue things, the demand's in the morning. The demand is before 6 o'clock for adults. There are so many adults using it, as you can see on just 4 stations in the library. On the 3 mornings that were open, between 10 and 12, it's very, very busy. So there's all this adult demand. We thought it would be there in the evenings. This is one of the big surprises to me. Instead, it starts dropping off after 7. The adult demand is also during the day. Now, whether this is people without jobs who want to apply for jobs, check the classifieds, do resumes, I'm not sure. We don't ask people what they're doing on the computer. Right. We give them the same respect we do with books or whatever they're reading. But you get this, if I would add hours, my inclination is to think it's early. Or from the graphs, it's early.
And it would be really hard to add more computers without additional space, which is.
Well, I know you have a 4th room in that facility that, again, just based on my passing through, seems to be underutilized. That's, I think, a mirror image of the room A and room B.
No, it's not. It has very specialized equipment, and I'm sure.
It has specialized equipment. I'm saying that it's a space that equipment appears to be underutilized, and I just wonder if maybe that's a inadequate use of that space.
Well, I'm sure Deborah will address the activities in that room in her presentation.
Yeah.
I think it's still a work in progress to some extent, and I know it's utilized because I see it.
Yeah, as a reminder to the council, besides rooms A and B, which basically are the public access computers, kind of that the library oversees, the 2 other rooms are sort of under the more general oversight, if you will, of the recreation department. The room that Councilmember Siemens is referring to is sort of a video music mixing type of thing. I think when Ms. Hademan does her presentation, I think that'd be an appropriate thing for her to discuss, probably more than Ms. Robbins and Ms. Brown.
I tried to get it for you. That's all. Thank you.
Maybe just as a follow-up to what Terry was just talking about, can you just say a little bit about how that room in the center is used? I know the original concept was different than what we've ended up with. Is there any possibility of utilization of that space?
You mean the office area?
No, I'll call it the lobby.
Oh. There has been.
What did I open up with that noise?
I don't know. I was thinking center. Yeah, it's a large space, and there has been some occasional discussion about bringing, tables or workspace in there, particularly now that there's Wi-Fi in that area. It would be really nice for kids. I think the concern for us would be simply keeping order in that space. It would be it would be another area that someone would have to monitor. You'd have to monitor noise level and use and appropriate use, and just the way we do in the library and just the way we do in the computer rooms now, particularly room A. So if you did it with one staff person who's now hard pressed to oversee 2 rooms, that would be an additional burden, and that would be my concern.
Right. So
but it is it's a great space.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a staffing question, but it's not space, and it's not necessarily equipment.
It wouldn't have to be.
Okay.
Just a couple questions about the staffing. You mentioned the 30-hour position and the 10-hour and the 10-hour. How many people is that divided among?
3.
And then 15 hours could be added to one of those 3 people's?
Yes,
Okay. What's the threshold over which we give benefits?
20 hours,
Over 20, okay.
20 and over.
How would you think it could best work if it were to be expanded? Would it work better if it was somebody who was more full-time, or would it work better if it was, looks like four people that had little hours spread among them?
Well, my sense is that if one of the 10-hour people who is already trained and, knows the job and we know is qualified, we're interested in those hours, that would be very smooth to give, to have someone working 6 to 8 also take the earlier hours. But it's also more expensive. I mean, it really depends on, and again, there's the issue of whether you could hire a 15-hour person in the middle of every day, although I'm surprised by the number of qualified applicants that Rebecca got, for the weekends, every weekend, every weekend afternoon and every evening. And she had a number of very qualified applicants, and we have qualified people there now. So I certainly wouldn't rule that out as, a strong possibility as well. I think it really is a cost.
Okay. Now, the hours, the computer center is open. Forgive me, I don't remember the hours when the library is open beyond that. Is it
The hours
10 to
open.
12 a couple of days a week?
Yeah, we open at 12 at 10 on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, and we're open until 9 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and we're open till 5 until Saturday. So the hours are a little different.
Right. And does it seem that the demand would be there if is it challenging to keep people out of the computer center?
Yes. They're sometimes inadvertently left open by the Public Works people in the morning, so that the problem becomes what to do when I walk over there at 11 in the morning and the rooms have got people in them. We don't have any staff, nobody's around. Do I throw these people out or not throw them out? So this is my moral quandary or something. There are people who want it. There are people who will sit outside the doors and wait for. We invite them to come over and read magazines while they're waiting, or wait in a more comfortable environment. But
Also, when the computer center closes at 8 on weekdays, people come to the library, so, often they have that last hour.
But it's less, statistically. The
Right.
people coming in after 8 is a small fraction of the people who go on between 10 and 12 in the morning.
So it sounds like the demand is there, and
For the
right now
hours.
the budget doesn't allow for staffing.
Right. So we were given 50 hours, so we distributed those 50 hours as best we could, where we anticipated demand, making it as minimal as possible with one person per hour and so forth.
And the 10 to 12 observation, you said that you found adults were using the computers from 10 to 12?
A lot of adults, because the kids don't tend to get out of school till 2:30 or 3. I mean, on the weekends you find kids in there in the morning and stuff, but the weekdays you have a lot of adults in that 10 to 12 period in the library from 12 to 3 and on through in the computer center. Most of them tend to escape room A about 3 o'clock and move to sign off and go sign on in room B or something like that. If you saw on that slide, those were taken about 4 o'clock, between 4 and 5, and there was a complete mixture of adults and children. I'd say it was 50-50.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm not normally positively inclined toward adding staff, but I can see the argument in this case. You know, one of the things that we were trying to do with the computer center was to make computers available to people who didn't necessarily have them at home. And when I read about the digital divide and the difference in access and information and opportunities available to people who have computer access and people who don't, it really bothers me. And I think one of the best things that we're doing with the computer center is offering a way for people who don't have computers at home to have access to the information and resources and opportunities that people who do have computers at home have. And it seems to me, and I say partly based on the information you've given us and partly based on my own observation when I'm here, that we are doing that. There are people in there, and there are young people in there, and older people in there, and people who look like they're sort of figuring out what they're doing, and people who look like they already know what they're doing. And it seems to me that we are, what I've seen and what you're showing us is that we have been quite successful in making this service available to people, and I think making it more available would be a big important resource we can offer to our residents.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. It just occurred to me that you said the staff is for oversight of the operation of those rooms, but I also think I heard you saying that, you know, some of their time is spent in trying to help people to use the computers. And I know this
That's
kind of
really most of the time.
Yeah, and this kind of intermixes with the next discussion, which is the rec department, because I think if we had computer training, it would probably be a program that's offered by the recreation department rather than the library. But I think that's regardless of who does it. I think the question is, wouldn't we and the community benefit greatly by offering some computer training?
There is a class for seniors that's offered through the Recreation Department on Wednesday mornings.
But you said that room gets very little monitoring, and the staff time is taken up in the other two rooms, which tells me that maybe that's where the people who need the training.
No, they go into room A if they want. Room A is where we offer support, and my feeling is some people want classes, but the majority want help here, now, at this moment with what they're doing and having trouble with. So rather than, say, well, you can sign up for a class, they want you to come over right now and say, why is my email not working? So that kind of help in doing a science fair bar graph or something like that is done one-on-one all the time. And the staff has been selected because they have the background to do that kind of work and to help people with job searches. We've had people who are very skilled in that. They're prepared to help the people one-on-one. We have the senior class. The weekend person is Spanish speaking, and he's planning to do some Spanish. We have less use early on. Sunday afternoon, I think, is our lowest usage time. So using the existing time and the existing staff, the plan is to do some Spanish language computer classes then, because that's his first language. So to take advantage of
and I know that language is a challenge any time in a community as diverse as this one. I would just like to close by making a special mention of Phil Shapiro. I see him in there a number of times. I know he's helped a number of Ward 4 residents, one of them Pat Lovelace right here, and he goes over and beyond what's required of him in his job description. I see him here at hours that are not his normal work hours, but he's in here helping people. He spends time helping Pat, who's blind, and giving him that individual, personalized attention. And I just think he deserves a mention.
Thank you. One of the time periods you said you thought that you could probably have it open or that people sneak in is from the 10 to noon time, which is, I assume, when you don't have a lot of students there, but you have mostly adults there. Is there a reason why you have to have supervision and oversight?
Well, the oversight, I'm sorry, were you finished?
No.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I think the oversight becomes an issue when you have lots of people, particularly when you have, groups of groups of kids where
Right.
you really do need to pay extra attention to keeping order, and it isn't always an issue.
I'm just wondering if you could provide access for 2 hours where it was just understood that there wasn't support there. Like, are you concerned about the equipment walking away or being damaged, or?
I think you'd want to have a staff person there.
Physically somewhere there. There's no, we can't see it, and we have people come over. There are times when that's happened, when there's been nobody over there, and we've opened the rooms, and then they come to the library desk for help, and then we have the problem of sending a staff person over there to work.
I mean, there's really, it's not in anybody's field of vision, that whole area, if there's no staff person there.
There's no security cameras on it.
Well,
It sounds like the problem is not so much protecting the equipment, but, somebody who's trying to read their email and suddenly something happens, and, they just need to go say to somebody, what do I do now? And rather than going over and bothering the library staff, who are probably doing something else at that point, and then would have to stop what they were doing and then deal with the computer center. It seems like if we're encouraging people who are novice users to get on the computer, having somebody there who can answer a question like, what does this screen mean, or why did it just do that, would be important in getting them comfortable. I can see the value of that.
I understand. I'm just saying that if the choice is between no access during those time periods and allowing access for people who are, don't need support, that's something to consider. I don't have
Like
a particular
opening-
opinion on it, but.
Yeah, like with opening room B, which already by policy, we don't give support in there. We do oversight, though. The staff person is looking in room B frequently to be sure that things are going okay, and
yeah, I think because the area is physically a little bit isolated from the rest of the community center, as well as blocked off from the library. If you had people using that equipment, we've never had a problem with equipment, but, I want there to be, someone walking through every once in a while. You wouldn't want to just have open rooms, I think, without a little bit of monitoring or oversight. That's my gut level feeling about it.
Are there other questions? Well, thank you all. That was a very helpful presentation, and I'm sure it will be very useful as we're, thinking about policies and things related to the community center and the computer center. So thank you.
Thank you.
The council is now going to take a short break, and we'll come back to continue our discussion. All right, we are continuing with our presentation and discussion, and did you want to?
Yeah, I'll just make a few comments as far as before Deborah starts her presentation, but obviously there were kind of two major components of the community center. Part of it was the computer learning center, which Ellen just addressed, and then probably a lot of the space really is under the oversight of the recreation department. What I had asked Deborah to touch on tonight, and it's fairly broad-based, was basically to give the council an update on the various program offerings that we've now been able to provide the community because we have the additional rooms and space available, and to give you some idea of what type of participation we've had in those various programs. As Ellen did, Deborah's going to basically talk a little bit about sort of what we've learned from, I guess in this case it's actually more 6 months of operation since the second phase didn't get done until the latter part of June of '06. And to also talk a little bit about maybe where we might be able to improve some of the services that we're offering the community. The council had specifically also wanted an opportunity to discuss the use and rental policy that was approved by the council in the fall of '05. Included in your agenda packet is a summary of the current provisions of that policy. And I think as part of Deborah's presentation, she's going to touch a little bit on what our experience has been under that policy and what's worked and what hasn't worked, to give the council some idea of maybe any modifications you might choose to make. So it'll be a fairly broad-based presentation, and after Deborah gets done, I certainly would be happy to talk about any of the issues that come up during Deborah's comments. So with that...
That's what I was planning to do.
Will you all fall asleep if we dim the lights anymore? I hope not. Well, thank you for being interested in this topic. I'm Deborah Hadeven, the Recreation Director for the City of Tacoma Park, as you know. That's great. Thank you. What I'm doing tonight, as Barb said, is really an update. I consider this a journey. We're about halfway through the first year, and we're learning every day, and in my opinion, where we are today is not necessarily conclusive of where we will be 6 months from now. We are studying trends and use, so it's important to keep that in mind. This is a process. You may recognize this depiction of the community center before. I do want to talk a little bit, I'm just going to give you a little overview, what we're going to talk about, what's going on in the building every day during the year. It's important to note, I wanted to include January in this study because it's a winter month, and it's an important month to pay attention to if we're going to try to determine are people coming inside because it's cold, and for us to speculate out a little bit in the calendar year. We've had some challenges along the way. We're going to discuss those a little bit. I want to talk to you about how the facility is being used and by whom. I have some recommendations to make, and then at the end, I'll be happy to sit at the table and discuss your questions or whatever else. Right here, this first slide shows the senior programs. Now, this is not just the senior room. You've heard a little bit about the senior room. In the Community Learning Center, all these names, it's hard to keep track. These are programs that we did not have before the community center was built. And I did want to give you some statistics here about what programs we're offering. The numbers that you see, the 715, for example, that's not 715 people. That's visits by any number of people for these programs. Again, I'm going to say it many times, since July 2006 through January. As you can see, we've expanded our senior programs exponentially, really, because we didn't have that much before. We have day trips, lectures, arts and crafts. We have some wellness programs, and some of these are brand new. The Bone Builders has only been in place, and line dancing for just a couple of weeks, but we're getting a great response from the community. Some of these programs are performed by volunteers. The computer class that Phil Shapiro helps with is actually led by a community volunteer. I have a picture of him later on. The drop-ins, we have put a booklet in the senior room and asked people when they come in to just sign their name. And I'm truly amazed by this number. This could be someone using a computer. It could be someone who wants to sit and read a magazine, who maybe participated in one of the programs you see listed here. And it's important to note, when we program the community center, some people have said, ooh, we're having a seminar, can we use the senior room? And I've made a commitment to the seniors to keep it exclusively for their use. And this number confirms that for me, that it is being used, the seniors count on it being open, and we really don't program it for anything else but the seniors. Many of you know Carol Ank, our senior coordinator. She and some of the recreation staff have transported a lot of the seniors to and from these programs in the city's van or the cars. It may be, for the seniors it's hard to get in and out of the vans, so we use the cars for them. Of course, now we have the bus. The last item, I don't know if you can see on there, it says game room, January only. We had some seniors come to us and say they wanted to play ping pong and pool. And because during the day the kids aren't using it, we said, we'll give it a shot. Well, in the month of January, we've had 53 visits from the seniors. And they're always looking for a challenge in ping pong. So I invite any of you to come over and take them on, because they're pretty good, and they love what they're doing. So. Many of you are familiar with our after-school program. It's called the Afternoon Edition. And last year you approved a budget for a morning program, which we've decided to start as a pilot. We have 15 children enrolled. It starts at 6:30 in the morning, actually 6:45, and we go through 6:30 in the evening with our Afternoon Edition. Being in this building has made a huge difference in this program. When we were over at the schools, we basically had one big room and a gym. Of course, the gym was nice, but this building has enabled us to expand our programs. The kids in the program can sign up in the afternoon, and they have a dance teacher come in. They have art in the art room, theater. We have special guests like the reptile guy you see there. And they can separate out by age group to do their homework or special projects. Now, it is limited to 60 children. If you're familiar with the Azalea Room, if you go in there after school, that's where the kids meet, get their book bags out, and sit at tables. Well, you really can't fit another kid in that room. So we're pretty much maxed out at 60 in that program. But it has become, in my opinion, one of the finer programs in the area, because we have the community center to expand into a real enrichment program as opposed to just a homework help. But we do that as well. We have tutoring. I've spoken to you, this group, before about the toddler programs, and we talk about trends, and this is the big wave that we are experiencing. And in your packets at your desk when we turn the lights on, I've listed out all the individual programs for you to see. There's art, there's music, there's Montessori, dance, language, and the response has been overwhelming from the community. And in the winter, you see, we've only just gotten through our first session, and we have 59. Imagine that would probably double. So we're very pleased with the response. And as I say, these are our customers of the future. So we're very happy with this enrollment. The drop-in programs, in my opinion, when we were designing this, I thought, the way kids are, they like to sign up for stuff, but they really just like to hang out with their friends. And I really underestimated the power of that phenomenon. We have, our game room we've divided it by age group to separate out the younger kids from the high school kids. So we do it by times, where the after school is for the younger kids. We have 203 members signed up, and it's $5 for the year. And I think the bigger hurdle for most kids is getting that darn waiver home and signed and back to us. But we do require the waiver because we have a contract for participation that the kids have to sign and the parents sign to say, I agree that I'm going to abide by the following rules, which is really to respect the staff and the equipment and your peers. The teen room is for teenagers only, and it's $10 a year. With that, you get a game room membership. We have 71 members. Now, here's the part I underestimated. We knew this before we even started, that kids came over here after school and hung out. But it's the real scene here in the city. If you want to come over around 3:30, much to the dismay of the poor staff working at the desk here, it really is a hub. There are so many kids in this building. And my feeling is we could be offering them more things to do, and we will be doing that. But my original instinct, I think, is true, that they really just want a place to socialize. And they deem this to be a safe and fun place with pretty good vending machines, I think. Now, I trended out the use of the game room for you by month. And, we opened practically July 1. This is just the game room now. And we have also charted use by hour. But I didn't put that. I didn't want to overwhelm you with bar graphs. So we're seeing a similar trend to the library, 2:30 to about 6. And then the use drops off quite a bit. Now, you've got a couple things going on here. The weather's colder, so the kids come in. But maybe in July and August, the kids didn't know about the facility. So I do think that's why a full year is going to be very useful to us. But I think when we look at these, it helps us for staffing patterns. And, I'm trying to remember. I think we need to chart the weather, too, because October we have a big boom in participation, which I can't really explain. Now, here's a game room for the weekends. You can see the last slide we had 300 and something kids. It's not drawing that many kids on the weekends, and I'm not sure why. But there are a lot of things going on for kids. They're in sports and music lessons and, a lot of other activities. But I think that these numbers will grow over time, particularly if we get more programs in the building. And here's the teen lounge. It's not as used as heavily. Obviously, there's more kids in the game room. And we're back to that October bump. And I thought back, and I think that's the month I bought the John Madden 2007 NFL Xbox game. I'm pretty sure that's what that is. But it's just interesting to me to see how kids participate. This may tell us nothing in the end, that it just depends on, you know, it could be the weather, their interest, what else is going on. And again, the weekends, not as heavily used for the teen lounge. And for those of you, I should say what's in the teen lounge. We have Xbox 360s, we have a large screen TV, we had a Dance Dance Revolution pad, which we've moved to another room, and it's really just a hangout area. Many of you may have noticed when you come in the back hallway, the kids hang out in the hall, and we want to get them into the rooms. So I did a tricky thing and moved all the furniture so they can't sit in the hall. Okay, now you know we didn't have a dance studio before, and it's been a hot item for in a way that I did not anticipate, and that is with the rentals. As you can see, we've rented it out 47 times. The dance classes, none of these programs we had before, with the exception of yoga and Tai Chi, which we had, and fencing. My point here is that this is how the room's being used, and it's a smaller group activity. You know, you might get 5, 6, 7 people per class, so you're not going to see thousands of people in these programs unless we offer hundreds of programs, which is possible, but I've been pleased with the participation in this room. One of my goals for this room, actually, without having a gym, is to provide a sort of a safe run-around place for toddlers to have a, you know, sort of a padded room with mats and just let them run around and play with Nerf balls and, you know, have organized play activity, but more on a drop-in basis. We might set aside an hour or two during the week so parents can bring their toddlers over and just let them run around. Now, I know that the art programs, some of the council members have been involved with and also witnessed, because that art room is often filled with students. And this is a room we do not rent out because it has some delicate equipment, including the kiln and supplies that the city purchases for its classes. We have worked on special projects. The senior tile project, Alice Sims put together as a volunteer, and Councilmember Siemens and his wife came and helped paint tiles, which are now the backsplash. It's actually phase 1 has been completed, and I guess we're going to fill the whole wall with painted glazed tiles that the seniors did. And I mentioned this before, but the afternoon edition also uses this every day in their programs. Now, these drawing and painting and watercolor, collage, and ceramics, we have middle school, high school, and adults. We have some art programs for younger kids, toddlers, and that accounts for, if you've been in there and you see all the paint all over the walls, that would be the taught programs in there. So it's pretty heavily used and quite popular. And I keep bragging about this, but I love the fact that it's mostly Tacoma Park artists that are instructors. And we're always seeking more, so I'll put that plug out. Other programs. Again, in your packet, I've listed out some of the specifics. The rec department's been doing classes for months and years, so some of them are new, some of them are existing or continuation. I didn't want to go into all of those, but there are a lot of classes going on in the after school and weekends too. The video blogging that Phil has done in the music and video room that was referred to earlier. We are going to be starting in 2 Saturdays a music engineering class for middle school and high school age kids, where we've got some students in engineering who are going to come and teach the kids on Saturdays, and then they're going to sign up for individual lab hours during the week. So you will see that room used a lot more. It's been the hardest room to get off the ground for various reasons, but it's a pretty specialized skill to be able to find the right people who can do it and then teach kids. So I think we're there now. We had a new program in here a couple weeks ago, family movies. We're hoping to get more families into the building. That's on a weekend. We've had workshops where we've worked with other departments in the city. We've had, the home buying workshops and things like that. Special events, the film festival, we had the grand opening, and lobby events, which are something we might talk about later, but some people kind of like the lobby for registrations and, for soccer and baseball and things like that. It's almost its own space to program. We've talked from the very beginning about partnerships, and we've had some new partnerships you can see on the screen. I'm not going to go through all of them, but we are trying to reach out to the community and not have the rec department do all the programming. That some of these groups offer programs, and some of them we advertise, some of them we don't, and there are different variations on partnerships, but we've been working quite a bit to bring in some different groups, and this will be a continuing project of mine, actually. As I mentioned, we've had some challenges along the way. You've witnessed a lot of them. That's Henry with all the wiring hanging from the ceiling. This, we did open in July, and we've had a lot of things concurrently going on with things like the wiring and the doors and the elevator, and it's caused some disruptions. And I know that some of the participants, particularly in the afternoon edition, the parents have felt that we had to move the kids around to accommodate some of these activities that were loud or producing dust or something like that. So I'm grateful to them for hanging in there with us, and the staff has tried their best to put a positive spin on, which is often just a hassle to try to relocate everybody. So that's been difficult, but I think we're pretty close to finishing, as Barb said, the elevator, and so I think that's something we won't have too much to deal with. I say elusive technology here. You've been informed about the progress on the door hardware and the swipe cards and the different issues with the doors not locking, and it's still this week. Correct me if I'm wrong, Barb, but the contractor was in. Some of the doors do not open properly when they're programmed to open, and this has caused us a fair amount of grief. And I will say, some people will come to the facility on a Saturday, for example, at 10 o'clock, and they can't get in the building. The doors don't open. And the staff's here, and there's just been some bugs or glitches with the software. And it turns out, and I spoke with Abel about it today, and he said it's just not still completely installed, that there are some pieces that are not completely installed. The way it's supposed to work is that the recreation department, when we book a room or a rental, is that we can program in the computer to just unlock the door, so that when you come in and you have the azalea room, we've programmed it so you just go and you pull it and it's open. We have not been able to do that, and it's caused quite a few problems for people, and we feel very badly about that. We do have a swipe card system in place for our staff, but it does require the public having to come up to the desk, getting someone to let them in. We're going to refine all of this, and on a good day, the staff will hopefully have their swipe cards. So we've had some issues with that, which is I'm going to get to in a little bit. The policy development and refinement, we've said all along when we started this, we were going to try out these different policies, and whether it's now we refine them or later, maybe we take a full year. I have some recommendations to make, but it's been confusing, to say the least. for programming this building. Lack of a large space. This has become a challenge for our programs, our after-school programs, our athletic programs. We'll talk more about this at the gym forum, perhaps, but, and I'm not saying this so that you will decide to have a gym. I'm just trying to point out the fact that it's sort of an incomplete circuit here when we don't have a big space. And it doesn't even have to be a gym. It could be just a large space that accommodates more people. And as I mentioned, we've had some staffing issues, which I'm going to go into in the next slide. We're almost done, so hang in there. Similarly to the library, here's our volunteer for our senior computer programs. The Recreation Department is responsible for this building beginning at 5 p.m. until closing, and Saturday 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., Sunday 2 to 6. Now, we have a staff, when we're fully staffed, of 8 full-time people. We have not been fully staffed for over a year based on some staff illness and retirement. So when we are fully staffed, it is 8 full-time people. Now that, you have to keep in mind, that's all of our programs in this building and the rec center in New Hampshire Avenue. And between the two facilities, we have over 30 part-time people. All of those people are 19 hours or less, and therefore avoiding benefits. We have contractors and instructors that are not on the payroll. We contract with them separately. And, of course, volunteers, which we, I think we could use better. I think we could have a bigger volunteer program. We're just not set up for it yet. So this kind of gives you the overview that there's a lot of people to manage. What's missing is, let me see what I'm going to talk about. Yeah, let me go back. There we go. With the staffing, well, I think we found, how many years ago did I come before the council and say what it would cost to run this building? And, you know, I was tasked with trying to keep the staffing at a minimum, or at least not to add any new positions. So what I thought would work is that we used our full-time staff to do an evening shift every day of the week, which really has worked fine for the staff, but it's created some other oversight challenges, which I think I'm going to get into later. So for now, I'm going to leave it there. Okay, now we're going to switch into the rental policy that is in your packet. I'm just going to review very quickly. There's 3 categories of renters: resident, non-resident, commercial. There's the rates per hour. And in order to rent a room, what you have to do, if you're a resident, is you can download the form on the internet. You can send it in the mail. You can bring it to us with a check, cash, or money order, depending on what time of day it is. Now, what you can't do is charge it to your credit card. And we take no reservations for paying people without a deposit. And I've got a slide here with some statistics. It's actually almost the same number of groups that rent the building, or 18% of the rents. There's 126 in this time period. You can see the revenue, $81.50. The interesting thing to point out, in the room rental by residential status, we have no one using this building as a commercial user, not one in this period. I think people have figured out how to become a resident very quickly. We talked about community use, free uses, and I've got 146 in this time period. Most of them are during the week. We have a few weekend groups. We have 3 groups that the council has deemed can have more than 11 free rentals: community band, swing jazz band, and the singers. The issues we have, I will restate that there is confusion about what the status of the different groups is. I think the policy maybe isn't generated out there enough. I know that my staff is confused. I know that some of the council is confused, and the public is confused. So I'd like to figure out a way to clarify all of that. People have complained about our window of reservations, that we have 3 months ahead of time, and there are only certain times that they can reserve because of the rec department needing to schedule in advance for programs. Sometimes we get multiple contact people who come in, and this, you know, the way the council set it up, if you have a member of your group who lives in Tacoma Park, they can then be the person who signs the room out. But then that's really not the person who's charged with getting rooms. And so it gets confusing about who's actually in charge. And council member endorsements. This is a phenomenon where people will call and say, council member so-and-so said that I can use the room for free and that I'm a community group. And we do have a process for becoming a community group if you're not already a recognized one, and that's also included in your packet. So it's very hard to keep track of all these groups. So here's my recipe for improvement here. And one of the things we hear from the public is that it's just not a very friendly feel or ambiance to the building. And I think that I've spoken with the rec committee about this, that we might try to get some help from the community about some interior design changes. I've identified a contractor here on the right who I think we might hire for some advice. And it could be furniture, little seating areas, pictures on the wall, you know, the art, which I mentioned about the lobby events. The Arts and Humanities Council has made a huge difference, I think, in the way the building looks, and gotten some great feedback from the public on that. And we're really thrilled to have that as part of our programming. Beyond that, it's pretty stark and not very friendly. Our marketing materials, I think what I'd like to do is, once we get all our policies and everything in place, is to produce some kind of glossy with pictures of the rooms and something that you can send out to people to market the space and the building. And I want to focus more on teen programs. We do have an opening that we're hopefully going to fill in the next few weeks for a teen manager, and I think that's going to take care of a lot of the kids hanging out, but also more programs should be happening in this building, and they will be. Like I said, I want to get more partners in the building, clarify these policies, and continue to study the data and to listen to the feedback of the community and make adjustments. I'm planning to propose a restructuring of the staffing, probably do that at the budget time, but similarly to what you were talking about with the library, is I'd like to recommend that we hire someone whose responsibility is the front desk in the after hours and weekends, and make that perhaps a 30-hour person with benefits, but so that we have one supervisor. This would not really require, I don't think, an increase in my budget. It would just be combining 2 part-time people and giving them benefits. And then I think it would create some continuity during the week. And we need to do a better job at training our staff and retaining them. We do have predominantly students, which we love our students. They have erratic schedules. We want them to focus on their studies. And so it doesn't make for a very stable workforce for programming. That's the end.
Well, thank you for that very good overview. Certainly raises a lot of issues. I think what I'm going to do is let people ask sort of informational questions so we can sort of make sure everybody understands the information. And then I know that there are some council members who have specific concerns, questions, and I know you would like to have us think a little bit about the usage policies, and I think we can do that after we've done the other two. But I want to make sure that everybody in the council has an opportunity to ask questions and get this clarified, and then if there are specific issues that the members of the council have or specific concerns, to make sure that we get those out before we get into the utilization and policies. Bruce.
One area that you didn't address, and I wonder if you can just characterize it, how would you say that the facility is holding up in terms of maintenance required or condition of the facilities?
Well, I've met with the Public Works Department on several occasions. I think that we're moving toward a more creative schedule for some of the staff in the Public Works, and I'm not really prepared to speak to that. Daryl would have to.
Could you move the mic a little closer to you? I'm not sure people can hear it. Thank you.
So I think that maybe the shifts for the cleaning staff might need to be staggered to better accommodate the way the building is being used. And we weren't sure how it was going to be used. So I think we're moving toward doing that. Everyone has talked about the paint jobs, and I think that we may as well just, the way it's being used, that we may as well plan on painting a couple times a year. But other than that, you know, it's a brand new building.
Yeah, but the facility as it is seems to be designed appropriately to withstand the level of use? Or would you say that there's any particular areas that maybe will need attention sooner than we might have anticipated, or stuff's, you know, like the building is rolling with the punches?
You know, nothing comes to mind in terms of, you know, the walls are all intact. I'm pretty happy about that. You know, the way kids run around and
right, and the dance facility, there are no problems with the way it was put together, or you know, all the electrical in the art room and all that kind of stuff. Everything seems to be pretty well put together and holding up to the way we're using it.
Yes. The furniture, I mean, the kids are really working the furniture, so I can see that we'll have to think differently about how we get the proper furniture and where to put it. But
and the game room, we're not coming up to the any issues like the county had with what they allow or prohibit in their gyms based on what goes on inside. The game room isn't being knocked apart by balls.
No, we're staying away from golf in there, but beyond that, it's pretty much anything goes. It's holding up well. Kids are respecting it. We do staff it, and there is a staff member in there whenever there are kids. So it gets pretty rambunctious in there. It's not like a library reading room, but it is holding up quite well, I think.
Okay, good.
Can I follow on to two of the
Sure,
things you raised? One is the dance party floor, those little things. They, my children were trying to get the gist of them this last week, I think it was, and one of your very able rec staff members was trying to show it, and it looked like they were really just coming apart. Do you know what I'm talking about,
Yes.
those little grids?
Yes, those are the most durable that they sell.
Right, no, they're,
And because my office is right next to it, I can tell you, the kids really pound on it. They
Right.
pound on it. And that, I think, might be something we replace annually.
yeah, I could see that happening. The only other thing I wanted to say is about the walls with streaks and things. I don't know if I'm the only neat freak up here, but anyone heard of Magic Eraser? No?
Let me write it down.
Oh, yes. Magic Eraser will make your walls look like they were just freshly painted. And it's like a sponge that disintegrates as you use it. I don't know what it's doing. It's the best thing I've ever found.
And it's not toxic.
I mean, it's basically a sponge, yeah, non-toxic sponge.
Okay.
So it may be something that the cleaning folks can look into procuring.
Sounds like you've had the need for gaining more experience with that in your
Seriously,
day-to-day
no, I was
life.
thinking about painting our interiors again, and I found that no need.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe I could just mention that I've heard and also noticed that after the afternoon edition, kids have left, and the people who come in the evening generally are adults, and there are a few little reminders of the whatever craft project was going on that day. They tend to be in the carpet and, you know, stuck in the corners and applied to the furniture. And, you know, I don't know, when you talk about changing the cleaning staff, that might be maybe cleaning in between afternoon edition. I mean, I think it's wonderful to have crafts and active things, and I understand that if you do that, you're going to have pieces of craft projects stuck to things. But maybe having cleaning staff come in between afternoon edition and the evening program so that adults aren't going home wearing pieces of craft project that have stuck to them from the chairs. Sorry, Bruce.
I just had two other quick things that I wanted to comment on. I know that you said you've had a fair number of comments on your window for reservations, and I know as I looked at the recently published schedule for how people make the reservations, the one that I've heard the most often, and I don't know whether it's consistent with what you've been hearing, is that for people who want to have meetings early in the time periods that you're scheduling, in some cases they don't know what they're going to have for until 2 weeks before for the beginning, and I didn't know if you had considered having more kind of rolling periods of shorter duration where people can schedule.
You know, we've tried to look at that and roll it, and the problem is that, and then I've done a lot of research on this, I've looked at other communities, and everyone does this. Every community does it. They might have, 1 or 2 weeks in either direction, but there has to be a starting point. And the reason for that is when we send out our guide, and I'm going to give you a very good example of this, we had someone call and say they wanted, or had been renting the dance room, and they had rented it every week for a while. We got a new instructor who wants to come and teach a class, and it's in that same period. Well, when our guide comes out, the class is starting on such and such a date. Now that rental is going to be bumped from that time slot because community programs have priority. And if we were to roll it or give people a waiver on this, then it's going to eliminate our ability to program community programs because other people are plugged in. So yeah, I'm totally sensitive to the fact that 2 weeks ahead you want to know. I think the best we can do is say, here's the schedule. It's going to remain pretty much the same every year, is to, there are some times that are not peak times. We can almost guarantee that you're going to be able to get a room. You might not get the room you want, but if we book all the rooms up, it's time for us to promote our programs, and we can't even get a space for classes. So it's not an easy answer, but again, it's what most, ICB does it with their facilities. There's a start date and an end date, at which point you have to, it's your window. And I've continued to research it. I haven't found a more creative way that makes everyone happy.
Okay.
And maybe we can follow that up when we get to the discussion of the policies.
And the final thing is, I wrote down a comment as you were talking about, you were considering more decorations for the building, and I could certainly see having more pictures on the walls, and I'll say with a sly smile that I noticed that the council pictures that used to be up have been face down in the on top of the filing cabinet for a long time, and we'd volunteer to take a little space for our smiling faces so people know who we are. And I'm sure that there are other pictures that would be interesting to have in the building, and maybe some information as well.
I have gotten so many complaints, Bruce, that your picture's
That
not
we're missing.
And I'll tell you. No, but I'm glad you brought that up, because I had totally forgotten about it. And then we'll have to talk about where that would go, because, because with the art shows that occupies the lobbies, but maybe in here.
They used to be up out here, and I think they got taken down during the construction.
Because maybe you'll end up with little horns on you in your picture or something like that.
I think
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for bringing that up.
Maybe the janitor's closet.
Colleen,
It's where they are.
I'm not worried because I don't have a picture.
we can fix
We'll
that.
take
don't
care of
worry.
that.
I'm afraid of that. So we're doing structure right now and not policy and practice, right?
Well, what we're doing right now is we're trying to figure out, trying to make sure that everybody understands the information before we get into the policies. So I want to put it this way. I want to sort of get through the part of the discussion, which is what programs we're offering, what information we have, any concerns council members might have about, because I know that in the past some things have been raised, any concerns people have about the information and the kinds of things that Deborah presented to us. And then I want, as a separate discussion, to get into the whole discussion of use and usage policies, because I think that's going to be a discussion in and of itself. So I'm trying to just save the usage policy discussion.
Usage policies, okay. Because I
Off
got a
the
list
table
here,
for
and
right
I'm trying
now.
to, figure out which part of my list goes in what part of the discussion. So I'll just start. That's obviously a usage one. Lobby furniture. I just envision really cushy lobby furniture, and it would be great to see more lobby furniture. When I came in the other night, the lobby, one of the pieces of furniture out there was broken. The front legs were off of it. It's sort of cold and hard, and I remember fondly my days in college when I would go to the library and sit down on the big fluffy chairs and listen to music quietly.
Senior room.
The senior room, no. Anyway, no, I think it would be nice if there was sort of more soft surfaces for the kids to sit on, and the lobby might be a place to do that. I looked with great interest at the tile project, the senior tile project, and I thought about the search for a solution for the Forest Park wall along Conway Avenue, and I wonder if we couldn't have I think it'd be great to have other community tile projects in areas that were suitable for that, and maybe we could plan some of those into our kids' activities, and that might be a good spot for a kid tile project or a senior tile project. I still wish we had a video editing bay for cable access shows. I know that didn't happen in the community center space, but I heard you talking about the music engineering and that kind of thing, and if ever there's an opportunity, I would just love to see kids be able to do basically TV shows and things like that. I did a lot of that when I was in school, in junior high, and it was a lot of fun. And then last question is quilt. I got the email from the lady about the quilt, and did the quilt ever get hung up again? And we were going to talk about that, and then I forgot about it, and now I have guilt. As soon as I saw the thing quilt, I went, oh, the lady with the quilt. The quilt is supposed to hang in some part of the foyer. I've never seen the quilt, so there's an old quilt by the Tacoma Park Quilters, and it hasn't been hung up yet. It's not been hung up yet, has it? Did we find it? Do we know where it's at?
We lost the quilt.
No, we haven't lost it. It was removed during construction to protect it. I just need to figure out exactly
I
where
think
it got
actually
put.
the cones might have taken it
Who's
for
it?
us, the cones.
The who?
Diana Cone.
Oh, the count, Diana.
There was also a number of things that were artifacts that were loaned to the city for display that actually were historic Tacoma. So Historic Tacoma did take possession of those prior to the beginning of the construction project.
Is that the time capsule?
Yeah, I believe, I can't swear to it because I talked to a member of Historic Tacoma, a member of the board who was removing them one day, and I assume she got the time capsule too.
My other questions are policy and practice related.
But it's a good point. I mean, one of the things that, you know, at least the rec department has been so focused on getting equipment and programs and kids, and, you know, maybe we missed the charge that or it just fell through the cracks of what the rest of the building would look like, the common areas. Bruce, you mentioned the lobby outside the computer rooms, the front lobby. I think there's great opportunity here. I don't think it would cost a lot of money. What it needs is someone who knows what they're doing, and that's why I asked the rec committee to maybe take it on as a project to try to put together a design or little seating areas or something, and then we could present a budget or maybe do a fundraiser from the foundation or some other way to make it happen. But it's definitely needed, and I've heard that many times. And so if anyone is listening who happens to be a designer or want to have some input, the rec committee will be taking this on as a project.
Well, I think your priorities were right, but I agree with you that it's something that needs to be done.
A couple of things, Deborah. One is about the statistics. While you know, it looks like the building is being very well used, and anybody that comes by during the day, as I have, and even on the weekends, can see that rooms are full of kids and people and interesting activity. Kids being people. These are the seniors and the adults and the others. Sometimes. But it might also be useful because we're benchmarking ourselves now. So in the next 6 months and next year, we'll have the data that you've collected now for comparative purposes. But it might also be interesting to see if we can find some other benchmarks. And one might be a community similar to our own in the area someplace with a recreational program, just so that we can see how we're doing with respect to someone other than ourselves. And then the other suggestion that I had, and this involves the visitor experience. You mentioned about the doors. One hopes that soon those glitches will be out of the system, and when it's programmed to open at 10 o'clock, it will, or even if it doesn't, there'll be someone there to welcome the people who are running part of the facility at a particular time. The other would be the signage inside the building, maybe a sign that welcomed people who had actually hired the room for a period of time, so that in the lobby there you might have one of those easily erasable boards that just simply say, welcome Terry Siemens and his Cub Scout group, or whoever it might be, and it gives people sort of a personal sense of appreciation that they're there, you're welcoming them, and also, of course, it helps organize, because if you see that there's someone in the azalea room at a certain time, then the chances of someone else blundering in there and thinking it's theirs would probably be somewhat reduced. And it might just help organize the crowd flow and give the staff and people who come there an idea of what's happening during that particular day. I think, the other suggestion would be, as part of the data gathering, if some kind of an evaluation instrument could be developed for people who use the room, and maybe selectively staff members who could call during the week and just try to gather some additional information about how it went for them. Were they satisfied with things? Were the facilities clean? Was the staff courteous and welcoming, and those kinds of things? Maybe you're doing them now, but if not, that could also be helpful, again, to benchmark ourselves as we go through time.
No, that's a good point. We do it with our programs. We give evaluations, but we haven't done it for rentals. Thank you for that.
Just a couple of things before we move on. The signage is one of the things that is still really lacking. And it'd be nice if that contract could be expedited. I don't know where it is in the queue, but it seems to be taking a long time. I'll just leave that there. And then when you talked about the technology challenges, it seems to me that if we have trained our staff and given them like the customer service orientation that they need to have to really serve the community in this capacity, that they would be looking for the person who had scheduled the room. So, I don't know how you could enable them to monitor the entrances, but then meeting the person at the entrance, maybe helping them by holding the door, that kind of thing. Maybe they've been given instructions to stay at the desk at all costs, but it seems to me that if there's someone who's scheduled to arrive and they're not looking around for them at the time of their arrival, then that's a missed opportunity to show that we really do have that professional touch.
Barb, do you want to speak about the sign contract, or?
Yeah, this is actually outside of Deborah's area. It's certainly something staff has been working on, quite frankly. It's just been a matter of trying to move from one project to another. It has basically gone, I think the package is ready to go out to bid, and once the bids are in, there'll be a contract be presented to the council. My understanding is that generally signs take approximately 2 to 3 months to manufacture, so it will still be some time, unfortunately.
Thank you. That falls in line with my first question, and I guess it really is what takes so long. I mean, we've needed these signs for a long time, and I guess you've answered it in a way that workload's just precluded getting it done, but it's just very frustrating that something that has been a concern to the community in using the facility and not knowing where to go and how to get there has taken so long to do, when it seems like to novice kind of an easy thing to take care of.
Yeah, I think if you've ever worked with any buildings, and it's one of my first tasks as an assistant someplace, there is actually kind of a hierarchy of signage. It's not just a matter of slapping them up, and you have to sort of think how people move through the building. It certainly has taken a long time, much longer than I would have liked. Having said that, the person who was assigned to work on it, quite frankly, has also been the same person who has been working on a number of other high-profile projects equally important to this council and to the community. She and I talked on a number of occasions whether or not it should be moved to another staff person, but there was a point that we just sort of got kind of right in the heart of it, and it would have been very difficult for someone else to pick up. It has gone back to the firm, and it's ready to go out to bid. That's about all I can say.
It kind of falls in line with my second question, which is the doors and the opening and closing of that and the computer software. And we heard tonight that maybe there's software that we don't have installed yet. And again, this is a problem that's gone on for several months now and has caused great concern among members of the community, frustration among members of the community coming to use the facility, not being able to get in, actually not staff members being unable to open the doors because they didn't have keys for the rooms to let people in, and had to change times around. And it's like, in the beginning, it's understandable where you have glitches like that, but after this many months of operation and still to be in this situation is concerning.
This is really, when I mentioned the programming, truthfully, it's been an issue that we have held back monies from the contractor for Phase 2. That was the the portion of this building construction that dealt with the doors. As the council may recall, the security features were actually added as part of the second phase and not part of the original construction. They were out here last week. There is all the software in place. It's a matter of working out some hardware glitches. There's really no issue on the part of the staff of being able to do the programming. It's getting the glitches fixed by the contractor. I can certainly speak to Ms. George, get an update from when they were out here last week. She is certainly aware of the ongoing concerns, and I've told her that she just needs to get it done and work with TRG. But there have been monies held back from their payments, specifically because of the door issues and trying to get those resolved.
And I guess I'll drop it after this, but it just seems like, there could be some workaround solutions that would eliminate some of the problems. We installed over $250,000 worth of security cameras and equipment, and I wonder if we couldn't just unlock the meeting room doors where there's nothing in there to steal but some cheesy chairs that we have. If we couldn't just leave those unlocked during the hours of so that people don't have to, prop the doors open so they can get back in if they go to the restroom and things like that. I had a whole list of questions, so I'm going to try to move a little faster through these. And I might as well, these were in no particular order, but it's a horrible follow-up, and that is just the art room and the supervision of the art room. There's been a number of times that whoever's using the art room hasn't cleaned up after themselves, left clay stuck to the table, things like that. And it raises concern on my part of since we don't rent that room out, it means that we are supervising those programs to some level. How does it end up being such a mess, and has that been taken care of, I guess?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but this came to light, at least to my attention, a few weeks ago, and I think that we have resolved that issue. Anybody that's in that room is a contractor of ours, and some of our artists are very clean and tidy, and they do very well cleaning up after themselves, and others are not. Now, the culprit that I think we're talking about, I've actually spoken with myself. I think, that we've resolved that. It is messy. Clay is very messy, and we even debated as to whether we would get into the whole potter wheel kind of thing. And I think in the interest of trying to expand our programs, we did that. We don't, it's not a huge room, so we don't have walls of cabinets and places to store everything. And I think that we've gotten a handle on it, but again, they're all contractors, or it could be the afternoon edition staff having a program in there. But I've spoken with all of them.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I wonder if we need to just have the staff person check the room after each usage to see the condition, to see if people are doing their taking care of it. Yeah. Anyways, like I said, I have a long list. I wanted to ask the council member Barry had suggested maybe some additional staffs. Do we keep track of when rooms are not in use? I know your presentation presented how much activity is going on, but there's frequently times that I see the dance studio is empty. Are you keeping statistics on when it's not in use and how much?
That's a little bit harder to do. Our program, we do not have a sophisticated software program. What we use for data is the group-wise email program, and that's how we schedule the rooms. And so it's a graphic you go on, and the data we have is really, we've had to count everything by hand. This goes back to my technology issue that, we've been sensitive not to come in here and try to buy the biggest, best computer programs if we're not really going to need them. And so we've sort of been trying to evaluate the data in a very unsophisticated way.
Okay.
I can say that. But it's very easy to look at trends, and what I can say, Terry, is that on any given day, there's no pattern. There are many city staff members who use the rooms for meetings, there doesn't seem to be a pattern to it, other than the fact that the weekends are probably emptier than the weekdays.
Okay. I just thought it might be helpful to know what your additional capacity is, so you know how much more space you have to sell. You mentioned the lack of large space, and I wonder if you could provide me, if not tonight, maybe next week, some information on how much we do rent the gymnasium space and the multi-purpose room space at the local schools. I wanted to comment. I told Ellen when she was here that I really was complimenting the work that Phil Shapiro does, and as we look at possibly increasing staff, and this is none of my business. I realize that as a council member, as staff assignments are not my business, but he sure comes across as being a rec department kind of guy, and so I hope you consider that, the value that he has and the way he works with the community. The window for reservations is, it seems like there are some of these groups, like the neighborhood associations and that I guess I don't understand the difficulty in just saying, here's how many we need for the year.
Can we get into that when we get into the utilization things?
That's great. I thought that was a separate issue. That's fine. Now, the last one is something you mentioned in your presentation, and I think it's really a question for the council, and that is, it started to sound to me a little bit like Walmart, that we keep our hours to 19 hours so that we don't pay benefits. That's one thing for students. It's quite something else for a young man or woman who is working here to supplement their income, or is maybe their only job. And I would like to challenge the council to discuss that when we get to budget time and see if we shouldn't change that policy a little. And that's all. Thank you.
Can you explain a little bit about the difference between full-time staff and who you use for contractors and part-time? Because I know in the past, in the budget discussions, you've talked to us about that. I agree with Terry's general point, but I think if I'm remembering the discussion correctly, and I'm not sure I am, which is why I asked you if you could say that, that the part-time people the rec department hires are different than just hiring somebody who's part-time in order to. We don't just hire 2 part-time people instead of a full-time person to avoid doing the benefits.
Well, not to avoid it. We have a certain number of hours we have to cover in a week for the building schedule in this building and in the rec center. We do not, to get back to the original question, full-time staff is 40 hours. All of the full-time staff is 40 hours. Some of them are union employees and some are not. Everyone else is part-time. They do not work over 19 scheduled hours a week, 19 and a half. We take our extra half hour because we need it. And I know it's very frustrating to the staff. They've been saying for years they'd like to work more hours without benefits. They just need, more cash. But the way the contract is set up, it doesn't enable them to work any more than that. The contractors are paid an hourly fee based on, the range for contractors is from $15 an hour to, some very highly skilled people can get $50, $60, $70 an hour. There's no benefit, no workers' comp, no tax taken out. It's just a flat hourly rate. And, obviously with the employees, we do take taxes out. And I believe there is workers' comp affiliated with part-time staff, too.
Yeah, anybody who's employed by the city, would be covered by certain things. When Deborah is referring to contractors, and just to clarify, they're not employees of the city, they're considered independent contractors. It's a very common phenomenon in all recreation departments where you're essentially paying someone to be an instructor for a class, and, for instance, or teach an aerobics class or whatever that might be. The reason under kind of IRS regs they're considered independent contractors rather than employees is you're hiring them to do a specific task, but you're not really detailing exactly how they are to perform that service. For any of you who may have, if you ever heard the term, someone who gets a 1099 instead of a W-2, that's sort of what you're talking about as far as being an independent contractor. There's not Social Security paid, they are just simply paid a fee, and basically so they're not actually employees of the city, and I think that may be the distinction that you were trying to draw. In terms of the part-time versus full-time, as Deborah, I think, alluded to, that's really what triggers benefits is really governed by the union contract and basically city policy, and I think just a matter of how we try to cover hours of operation and some of the flexibility that using a certain number of employees who work less hours versus having one employee who works more. That's certainly something we can talk about during the budget process if the council would like. I would say it's, in my experience, you usually do not offer benefits to someone who works below a certain threshold of hours. What that threshold should be is obviously a matter of policy.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think what I'm suggesting is that this council review that policy and see if we don't want to change that so that people can work more hours. We're not limiting it because of the benefits, and that this council might be willing to, foot the bill for the additional costs. And I don't think it's a question just for the recreation department. I also think Public Works is probably in a similar situation.
I just want to second that. I think the issue has come up during budget discussions several years in a row, and the situation I was aware of was in the city gardener's purview, and finding out that someone has been working full-time but as a temporary for years is really kind of shocking. So in this situation, I don't know if you have people that are able to do full-time work, but I think that if we have that threshold of 20 hours incurs benefits costs, that we don't want to be like Walmart. We don't want to be keeping people at 19 hours just to avoid the benefit costs. That's my opinion. I don't know if the rest of the council feels that way, but it's certainly something we have talked about at budget time, and I'd be happy to talk about again. I think this, we need to run this city very differently than Walmart runs their business.
Right, and I don't think it, like I said, it's not a question for you, it's a question for this council.
Yeah,
because they are some of the lowest paid people probably in the...
And I think it would be an appropriate discussion to have during budget time, and I see the city manager is taking notes and can put it on the list of things that we will take up with the budget. Is there anything else?
Is he done with this list?
I guess. Are you finished, Terry?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you have some additional things before we get to the use and rental policies?
Oh, what was...
We were just talking about general programming. We were on review of recreational program offerings, participation, et cetera.
All
if
right,
the council
carry
is
on.
ready to move into the next, unless there's other questions. All right, now we're going to move into the facilities use and rental policies. All right, Colleen.
All right, I'll kick it off. Let's see, the first ones are things I just want to share with you. They're comments that residents have made and kind of put out there, and I'm not really expecting some great answer to these things. But I've gotten a few comments from residents who come in to rent, and A, they're surprised how really inexpensive it is to rent, and B, they're surprised that being a resident of Tacoma Park, and this line is also frequently followed by them telling me all about how much in extra taxes they pay to be a Tacoma Park citizen. that they pay the same rental rate that someone from the county pays. And and I explained that, that was part of the deal, the county gave some money, and I frequently get a lot of pushback on that, and people say that they don't have a problem with the county residents getting a discount beyond like non-residents that are Prince George's County or the district or commercial people, but they do think that there should be a difference for people who live in the city versus people who live in the county, so that...
I have to interrupt you, Colleen. That's what the non-resident fee is for non-city residents. We have a differentiation between city residents and non-resident. Non-resident means anybody not in Tacoma Park. It could be D.C.
So these are county residents, and there is a fee differential.
There is, yes.
So I wonder why people have that impression.
Also, can I just get you to say what you said again? Did you say people are surprised at how expensive it is?
Inexpensive. It is. I paid $10 an hour to rent the dance studio, which that's a killer deal. The kids had a great time. It was a terrific space. The party was a huge success. So 5-year-olds having a rock and roll dance party. It was great.
Are you saying that you think that Tacoma Park residents would be willing to pay higher rates?
I'm just saying that this is the feedback I've gotten. No one has complained to me that they pay too much for the community center. They have expressed delight and surprise at how inexpensive it is, and and there's an impression that they feel like there should be a deeper discount. Now, a couple of people have talked to me specifically about the county versus the Tacoma Park residents, and I kind of had it in my head that it was that way too, but maybe they feel like there's not enough of a discount between residents and non-residents.
There are some, what is it, soccer, Babe Ruth, there's something where there's a minimal difference, and we talked about it before. It's not these hourly rates, it's like registration fees. I think, $125 for residents versus $135 for non-residents.
Yeah, they were talking about a $5 difference, but they were referring to the community center. Maybe they're
right.
maybe
So
they're
it's
confused.
some class where there's a registration fee that's kind of sizable. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. I don't have the formula in front of me. There is a scale.
I see.
But for like $0 to $75, it's a $5 difference. Above that is 10, and then 20. I think that's the
I've
rate.
gotten those same comments, but it's on that big fat registration fee.
I should listen harder to my constituents. Okay, more marketing. This is just another comment. I get this comment from like 2 or 3 people in the community, but they say it to me over and over again, so I'm going to share it with you. More marketing to bring in more income. Lots of complaints about the reservation system, the timeliness issue, but also just not being able to do registration online or by fax or by credit card, and that's an issue. If we could get credit card registration, that would be, I think, probably the easiest pick-off. And then to be able to have some kind of online registration. I suggested before that I think the county has online registration. I wonder if we could catch a ride on their contract and get some assistance there. Pre-setting the rooms that have been rented is another common issue. People get into the room. If they rent the room starting at 2 o'clock, somebody's just opening the center at 2 o'clock. They really sometimes don't get into their room until 2:10, 2:15, and then they have to set it up, even though they fill out on the form about, how many people are going to be there and what kind of setup they want. And it seems to me that that's something that maybe could be preset beforehand, at least for the start of the next day. Especially because, like I said, when people come in on the weekends and at 2 o'clock, that's when the staff seems to show up. So if you rented starting at 2, you really don't get your room till 2:15. So maybe that could help. And I think that's all of the comments that wouldn't require a response. One more, I guess. Setting commercial fees by use and not by resident. You noted that as an issue, and maybe that's one way to address that if you feel like people are abusing the resident privilege and, bringing in industrial groups that they're a part of or something, that maybe it could be more about the actual use. I mean, you can tell if somebody's using it for a birthday party or for, some assembly project or something. Okay, then I have to ask if I'm guilty of this. You made a comment about council-endorsed
Oh, don't do that.
groups.
Point fingers, would you please?
So here's my question. I got a call from a constituent. He's a leader in the part of the Troop 33 group that was here. He had a conflict with a staff member over reserving a room. This was just when the new policy came out. People were getting used to it. I called down, didn't get a satisfactory response, asked if I could have the room for the time frame. I got entirely different treatment than he did, and went over and opened the room for him for the meeting and came back and checked on it and everything. Is this what you mean by council-endorsed groups? Because my intent, and I've never heard from them again, my intent was to help facilitate this group during the transition. And I think that that's been successful because now they've completed some paperwork process and they haven't called me again. And I could easily identify them as a group who was qualified. I know them and I know the group. So am I the person who's targeted for council-endorsed groups?
You shouldn't take it to heart, Colleen. Really. You know, the beginning when we had the Hefner, and Joy, you were running up with Keys and Terry as well. And Terry. That period, I think we've resolved all those issues to everyone's satisfaction. The Hefner, as far as I know, is running very smoothly now. Okay. So it's not an issue as far as I know. There are definitely transitional issues, particularly with these doors. And, you know, one of the things that's happening with the doors, when I mentioned the software, I suppose that in some ways we are a custom user of this software, and that the ability to sit at a desk and unlock doors, which seems very easy, because we have secure area of the police department, and this is not really secure. My staff doesn't have access to the police department, and they're having trouble. The software maker, I guess, is having to figure out how to separate out the two zones, so that we can't say, "Oh, let's go down to the police, you know, evidence room. Let's open that door." It has to be completely off limits to the staff on this level. You're frowning, Mayor. Does that make sense? Or
I'm understanding what you're saying, but I guess I don't understand why that's a huge issue.
Yeah, it's a software issue that I'm not. So that's one of the things that's happened with the doors, and it is a huge frustration. We've all been trained on how to do it now. We're ready and willing to be able to do it, but it's just an issue that has to be resolved, as far as I know.
Okay, so, I still have more, sorry. Under policies, staff, last time I come in here, the staff are talking on their cell phones. And residents complain to me that every time they approach the desk, at the front desk out here, that people are clearly having personal phone calls at the front desk. And I've had the experience where I walk up to the front desk and the person says, "Oh, I'll call you right back," and they hang up. That happened to me like 3 times in a row when I approached the front desk.
On a cell phone or on the landline?
On the landline. So I think that in part it's a cultural issue about, you know, people, you hire young people, and young people talk on their phones a lot. But I think there has to be a pretty clear boundary at work, and I think also there has to be, to me, a clear boundary about when people are on break and when they're not. I know that's reasons why a lot of companies require that people have a separate break room, and they don't let people break in the lobby, or if they work in a restaurant, in the restaurant, because then the patrons can't tell if they're on break or not, and if they're doing something. I mean, maybe they're on break or they're after hours or whatever, but then they call and they're like, "Oh, you know, this person was doing X, Y, Z," and I'm like, "Well, I don't know if they were working at that time or not. It's hard to tell." And then sometimes when I'm there, you know, and I'm talking to people, they're not on duty. They're like hanging out afterwards. They like the kids. They're playing with the kids. They're building interaction, and that's fine. I don't want to discourage that, but I don't know what to do about that. It's kind of a conflict.
The break issue, I mean, we really are staffed with essentially 3 people at night. One is supposed to be at the front desk, one in the game room, and one in the teen room. We've built in a half an hour period for the staff to have dinner. We did have complaints, and I have forbidden staff from eating at the front desk, and I've asked them to come and sit out at the tables here where other people. Now, to your point, they're not at the offensive place.
Right.
They have to eat.
Sure.
And if they go disappear into a break room, then I'm down one staff. And, I mean, it might be something that we can rotate out better, but personally, I don't have an issue with them sitting out here. At least they're still eyes and monitoring the building. The phone issue, I'm just happy to hear they hung up the phone when you
Okay. Can I ask one more thing on that? Is that their only desk behind that counter there?
The only desk?
Like, where do the recreation staff members have their actual desks?
The full-time staff members have computers and desks in our office. The part-time people, we have some workstations in our office, but because of the feedback I've gotten from the community, the computers now, we don't have internet access on those computers because the staff was doing whatever. So then now they can't do that. And I think there are some nights when it's pretty slow and they're probably bored. We drum up all kinds of business during the day for them to, collate and count numbers and do all this stuff. But some days there's just not much else for them to do. And so some days you might see people sitting around and you think, oh my gosh, what are they getting paid for? And other times you can't even, find a staff member. They're running all over the place. So
Right. So they do have a place to go take a break and make a phone call and things like that. Because I think I was worried that we were talking about that as their only area. Sometimes when I've approached the desk, I have felt like I was interrupting, when it looks more like a reception area to me. But if that's their desk and they've been given these tasks and then they're not sure maybe what the priority of walk-up customers would be, so I think as long as if you've remedied some problems, as long as you make sure that they're not eating, they're not having personal phone calls, then to me, like what they do behind that circular desk does need to be very publicly presentable. And so if they have time for all of the other things in some other location, even if it's just right there in the tables in the lobby, that seems fine to me.
Well, I think what's interesting in our culture today of what constitutes an emergency phone call on a cell phone, I don't know what we did before with all these emergencies, but it seems like, and it's everybody, it's full-time staff, it's everywhere I go, I have to have my phone for an emergency. I don't think we live in that state of panic, or we shouldn't. So it's an ongoing issue.
Sure. And they probably get phone calls.
Yes.
So then they didn't make that phone call, but then they received it, and then what do? Just put it on voicemail.
Well, you don't wear your phone. That's what you do.
Did you finish your list, Tom?
Oh, no, sorry. Okay, so this comes under the category of a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. My employer sent me to school to learn more about budgeting and accounting, and one of the things that I thought about was that when I paid for my birthday party for my kid, they originally rented me the Azalea room, which turned out to be being used by another person, and the Azalea room was $20 an hour, and then the room that they ended up renting me was $10 an hour, but I had already paid the $20 an hour rate for the room. And they didn't refund me the balance of the room for the 3 hours, which would have been $30. And I'm not telling you this because I want my $30 back. You keep the $30. But I'm telling you this because I used it as an example in my class of an accounting issue where there's some issue there where you're not tracking money going in and out because somebody has taken money for a room rental, and they've taken money for 2 room rentals, and there should have been something that was triggered in the way that accounting went to where that room went, that I gave them more money than was actually required for that room, but that didn't happen. Did that make sense?
I know what you're saying, and you had the dance room also.
I also had the dance room, which I paid for, and that was fine. That wasn't an issue. But yeah, so they rented me the Azalea room and filled it out on the form, but then it was double booked, and so I moved into another room that was less expensive. And there's no mechanism there then that comes back and triggers to say, what you actually ended up renting was a different rate, or that this room was rented twice, or, something about the way those fees travel. See, I didn't get enough education because I can't tell you what solution, but I was able to identify it as a problem.
How did the room end up being double booked? I mean, that's a problem.
That's another issue, but we already worked that out. I just wanted to throw that out to you, because it's something to think about. It's probably something that a reservation software system would catch and kind of be a part of, because it would be taking money and everything.
Right, but and then I know you did, but you would still have to register a complaint that you didn't get what you wanted, and I know you did that, but that should be what triggered. That should be what triggered.
Because it didn't occur to me until later when I was taking the class. All right, do we have a system for checking in kids? Like, how do we know when a kid doesn't show up, and if they don't show up, what do we do?
For what?
For class, like after the afternoon edition. We have
the
kids that come
edition,
from other areas.
there is a system in place. If we're going to pick up a kid at the school, we check the absentee list to see if a kid's absent. And if we're expecting a kid and we don't see him, then the staff calls parents or
Okay,
guardians.
so we do have a system in place.
But that's not true for every program. If we have a kid sign up for chess and the kid doesn't come.
But it's true for afternoon edition,
Yes.
for the basically the daycare.
Yes.
Okay. Two more. My opinion on using part-time folks is that you might have. I understand why we use part-time folks. I mean, it's just part of the way you design the budget. But one of the things I think that has happened is that we have staff who were, when I talk to the staff, they talk about these exciting ideas that they have, and they feel like things haven't worked out the way they wanted to, and they get kind of down about the job. And it seems like there's not sort of a continuous transition of ways for people to move up. And that might be something to think about when we're designing the staffing plan, is to have a way for people to grow in the jobs. I know not everybody can grow in the job, and if everybody who's part-time decided to stay and wanted full-time jobs, we couldn't do that. But one of the things that we might consider is offering 50% benefits instead of 100% benefits to everybody, if that was a goal. And my last question is, who is the Danny Epps Swing Band, and why do they get to have 23 free rentals?
They're one of the groups that we decided, aren't they? One of the
I don't
three.
remember that.
Yeah.
Swing band, they might not have been referred to as.
Do they make money for what they do?
No.
I mean, I thought it was the Tacoma Park
No,
Community
none
Band.
of these groups make
Okay.
money, no.
So they're like, they're
They're
like
a
the-
long-standing group.
Yeah, long-standing.
So they do community functions and.
Yes, in fact, they're interested in doing more community functions.
Okay.
Many of the functions they do right now are outside of the city limits, just because they're not asked to do functions here at the city as much as they would like to do.
I think you're thrown off by the Danny Epps thing. I think we usually
Who is
refer
Danny
to
Epps?
them as the swing jazz band.
I think that's right.
Okay. Very quickly, the registration where you have it end and then you don't take reservations, is there any chance you could do it the 3 months rolling and roll right over the end of the year instead of the way we're doing it?
It coincides with the, I know it seems very self-serving, but it coincides with the recreation brochure and when it comes out, and it comes out in the newsletter. So we take that schedule and then back it up so that we have time to schedule, say, for example, our fall programs. We do that in July. And then by the time we get the brochure prepared and printed, it's August. And we do our programs from September all the way to December. And that's, the windows coincide with our program offerings.
I understand that, but when you quit taking reservations until like the end of December, is that because you might have to cancel somebody in January?
It's because we...
Like if you had taken the reservation for January, February, March?
We can't take the reservation because we haven't done the brochure yet for January, February, March.
All I'm asking is the danger that you would have to cancel
Yes.
somebody who you had already allowed to
And
make...
we've had to do that.
Right.
Anyway.
And how mad are they then? Are they more mad then than they are when they're not able to reserve the room for January?
I threw out my mad scale. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Mad scale, I like that.
Yeah.
Thinking like a scientist.
We only use happy scales now.
Yep. Well, I still think
Not sure.
there's something to be figured out there.
Well, I can say this, Joy. One of the things people like to do is advertise these things that they've done or that they're planning.
Right.
And they want to put out a schedule. And once you put that schedule out, it is etched in stone. And for people to then have to cancel something that's advertised, they would be mad then. That I don't blame them. We've had to do it. But especially if it's something open to the public, if you have a set membership, you can call them and say, we have to move the meeting. But if it's an event, it's very hard to cancel once it's been publicized.
Can you have a greater lead time for scheduling your classes so that by October you would know what you were going to have come out in January?
It's not realistic. It'd be nice if we could, but I mean, what you're saying is that we have to get contractors and very specific schedules for January, February, March, April. And you're saying, can you have that all set in stone in October?
Actually, I'm just asking if you could have January set in October.
Well, it's January, February, March. When we hire somebody, it's for 12 or 15 weeks. We start in January, we go through April. So it's very difficult. I'm just telling you the reality. It's hard to do.
The next thing I wanted to bring up is it seems that contact information for instructors needs to be given to the folks behind the desk so that they can call when there's a cancellation or if there's a problem. That's an issue that has come up, and
I'm not aware of that as an issue, but I will.
Do you have a feedback mechanism for, like, your staff on the weekends and after hours to, like, shoot questions back to you and get information?
We have cell phones. Yeah, we get calls. Matt gets called all the time on the weekend. I mean, we try to anticipate questions, but you know, I saw Matt going over the weekend schedule already with a staff member, trying to anticipate what the needs would be. But things happen, and people, you know, show up and they say, "Oh, I thought my event was today," and either they forgot or, you know, a lot of things happen. So the staff really does have to think on their feet and try to get in touch with somebody the best way that they can.
Okay.
But your suggestion is not a bad one, to have the contractors' contact information.
Right, just available for your staff.
Yeah.
Online reservations, I'm aware of how websites take credit cards and all of that, and it's not beyond the skills of our city. It's just not. I ran my own website when I was campaigning for office. You can use PayPal. You can use individual, other companies will do that, and it's worth it.
Well, I've been advocating for that for some time, and I think even for our programs, I think we'd increase our customer base. It is an issue, though, for finance and accounting, and I know now there's a whole other layer to it for security, having staff take account numbers over the phone. Or
yeah, no, that's not what you do.
Right.
It's online. It's online reservations, and you have a secure server do it, and then they just put money in your bank account.
Right.
That's how you do it.
Right.
Okay? You don't reinvent that stone or wheel from a stone. Sorry. Okay, moving on. I agree. More marketing is needed. I wish I hadn't been right about this, but I think a long time ago we had conversations about facilities management and coordinating, and there's so much that you have on your plate to do. I don't think you need to be running around worried, about clay in the art room from the last event not being cleaned up before the next event. And that's the kind of facilities management that a professional person does. They know how to do that. They're working with the custodians, and they're working with the program people like you, and they're working with the supervisors if there's any problem, and they know how to do all of those things. I would like to see that seriously addressed, and facility management where they could do outreach and make sure the facility was being maximally utilized. Marketing, communications, I see it as somebody who was like a program manager type person, pretty good at that stuff, and able to learn what our particular needs are here, and able to work with all of our different departments to make it a seamless operation. I just think I'd much rather err on the side of people being impressed that they met with someone who was so polished at our city building. That's the side I think residents want us to err on. And we're certainly not there yet. I do understand this has been a transition and a learning period, and we really don't want to throw money away. I don't think this would be throwing money away if we did it going forward. I think it would be exactly the service that residents are looking for. And, we should look at adjusting fees. If feedback from people is that they're not quite what the market will bear, then, maybe we need to address that and be getting some greater return on our investment. It would help defray the cost of the staff, and then the expertise that the staff had, and the quality of employees that we want to continue to hire and retain. So I think I mentioned the customer service orientation before. I think that's something that has to be pretty much the make or break of the people that come into contact with the public. Are they good at it? Great. Let's keep them. Let's groom them for advancement. Are they not good at it? Let's find them a better job or a different niche, or let them go. I just think that customer service orientation, I've seen many of your staff be very good at it. And, that's terrific. Those are the people that we really do want representing our organization. Okay. Then I wanted to let you know a couple of kind of brands that I was excited to see. I think they're being included in upcoming schedules, like Create Arts and Class Acts, and I think Create Arts. No?
Doesn't sound familiar to me.
I think Abracadoodle was one that my daughter wanted to sign up for that class just because of the name. Did not even know what it pertained to, but they had a flyer in the lobby. She loved the name. So that kind of brand marketing makes whatever person is doing outreach and coordination and marketing of this facility, it makes it just 1,000 times easier. So I really am glad to know that that's, continuing, progressing, and I hope that you'll expand that even further in whatever way you can. And then lastly, the software issue. You said you were managing the space with GroupWise?
Yes.
Okay. I don't actually know how that
Well,
could work, but
the good thing about GroupWise, at least for the city staff, is everyone in the city staff has access to be able to view the schedule. And so then, rather than them calling and saying, is it available, is it available, is it available, they can look and see what's available. Beyond that, that's, to me, the extent of its usefulness.
right.
I think there are better scheduling software out there.
Anything that could be an adjunct to what's already in use?
I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that.
You know,
Probably need a whole new.
Maybe Montgomery College has experience with this, or other facilities.
Well, I know the county does. They have a $1 million software package that's way beyond our need. I think there are smaller vendors. Yeah, there are smaller vendors for community our size.
I'm wary of those smaller vendors, I have to say.
Well, I'm
Having not
aware
been
of-
impressed with Civicol and some of
Yeah.
the other software we've used. I'm wary of that. I would like to, you know, there are packaged products that do the things that we need them to do. So I'd be more inclined to endorse that.
There are some pretty well-established recreation software. The issue is, our program registration goes through Penimation, which is the city's accounting software. So we're sort of piggybacking our operations on the existing city software. It makes sense in theory, I think.
Is it
it's
good
useful
software,
to-
though?
Well, it is for certain things. It's not recreation software, so, but it does interface with finance, so that has a value. If we had another third party, as it were, we'd have to interface or do a separate deposit, and it's pretty complicated.
Okay.
But
If you do go to online reservations, I would think that that would open up many new possibilities for you.
I agree.
You know, so that what your staff did was go online and do the same thing, you know, with a person standing in front of them that people could do for themselves.
We've heard that a lot.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. The hour is late, and Councilmember Austin Lane and others have talked a bit about the software and the issues. I would just like to concur with what's said, that I think we need to look at the software choices. You know, Civicol was and continues to be a concern. The doors is again software, and you know, group-wise for the scheduling, maybe we can find something better. I don't know if we need some kind of a plan to do software selection in a different way, or what. And again, that's directed towards the city manager. I would just like to go on record after Councilmember Clay's comments about the rates and people finding the rates to be low. My constituents haven't expressed that to me, and in fact they have expressed frustration that they've been unable to use Hefner Park in particular because of the amount that it costs, and have had to actually go outside of the city to find something that they found that they could use. And I realize that we do have you know, hardship or whatever we call it, some relief for people who can't afford the prices, but some of my constituents find it difficult to ask for that, and they would rather just find someplace else to go. So as we talk about the rates and the way things are rented, I would like us to continue to think about how we can make it an easier process for people who can't afford the facilities. One thing that was mentioned earlier, again, I think it was Councilmember Clay that mentioned the setup. It's when room reservations are made, I think it would be nice if we asked what was needed in the room, so that if it's a meeting and they say they're going to have 8 people there, that when they got there would be 8 chairs, or if they that there would be some questions on the registration for what kinds of facilities they need. Do they need an easel? Do they need chairs and tables, or what? I find that's a practice used in other places, and it might be helpful here, because I know that in some meetings, you know, the first 5-10 minutes is spent trying to get the room open and set up for the meeting to actually start. And again, that's a service we might be able to provide, but just ask you to look at that and see if it is.
Okay.
The question on the window for reservations, I think speaks something about the way I hear what you're saying is there's a priority question and that is if the neighborhood association, who knows their schedule for the coming year, we don't want to make reservations for them for that whole year, even though they may meet, let's say, 8 times in the year, and so they get their free rentals for 8 times. But you're reluctant to do that because there may be a contractor that wants to use the facility at that time. Is that what you were saying?
No, the rec department may have a class, or even the city, official city business. We give priority is for city programs, official city programs, and then it's open to the public, and that includes, housing and community development, COLTA, users like that. They have priority use over the space. So that's why if we were to give all of the community groups that use the building during the year advance reservations, it would eliminate a lot of rooms from the pool that should be, at least the view that we've been promoting from the beginning is that city programs have priority. I don't hear anyone saying that we need to change that.
No, I'm trying to just talk through, see if we can maybe find a solution. Is it possible that we could set aside a certain percentage of the space for city usage, and so that the community groups could book space, and at some point say, well, we don't have anything available, that far out right now, but if space becomes available, you can check back later.
Well, that's what we do. And, I think when people express this concern to you, you should ask them how many people have actually been, locked out of space. We've been able to accommodate almost everyone. What we can't do is promise, 4 months ahead of time. We do everything we can, and to my knowledge, we haven't actually, and I might have missed 1 or 2, we haven't had to kick people out. We find another, like I said, they may not get this room, they get that room, but, to have the ability to offer new programs and to meet the needs of the community, the things that you see on this list, 3 months ago, half of them weren't even there. We're developing new programs all the time, and I think in order for us to market the building and market the space, we have to reserve the ability to reserve space.
And I think that speaks to the problem. And the facility's only been open for 6 months, and it wasn't until December and January when people started to look at their next year's schedule that they started coming to you and find out that they could only book so many months in advance. And as you said, the programs that you're offering is grown considerably since you started, and it's continuing to grow. You expect it to grow even more so. And I think we should look at this real close, or at some point, maybe all we have is space for programs, and is that really what the right mix that we want for the community center? Not have space for the community meetings. And again, it's not a question for you, it's a question for this council.
Yeah, I think we're a ways from that point, in my opinion. Terry, I think, like I said earlier, when you look at other communities, we're not the only one with this issue. Everyone seems to solve it the same way. There has to be some window. There's no way around an opening and a closing date for reservations. I'm not saying that's the final answer. I haven't seen a proposal that would work for everyone. There's going to be...
When you say, maybe I don't understand, when you say there's an opening and a closing date for reservations,
right, it's
could you
listed
explain
on
that?
it's on the policy here. I think it is. Yeah, on the second page of the policy. For usage from January 1 through March 30th, reservations are accepted as of December 15th. Now, someone made the point earlier, December 15th, and you want a meeting on January 2nd, that doesn't give you very much time. I would say make your meeting a little bit later if you can, if you want to guarantee. If you want to take the risk and wait till December 15th, we'd be able to confirm space for the 2nd of January. So these dates.
And then what happens if they come on December 16th? And they ask to book a space on January 3rd?
It's open to the public on December 15th. Anybody, if we don't get a flood of calls on the 16th, we get a few calls. From the 15th on, you can reserve space for January through March. It just means you can't reserve before that date.
I would guess on that issue that if people had gotten the kind of customer service and follow through that they needed, like if someone said, okay, I hear you need a space, tell me how much room you need, and then said, I'll get back to you on December 15th. Like that says you're in the queue, and
That's
December.
actually not the problem that I've heard about. The problem is somebody has a monthly organizational meeting that's on the first Wednesday of every month, and they can't set up the January meeting because
What I'm saying is that
farther ahead of time.
because we have so many rooms, okay, there's a very small likelihood that all of our rooms are going to be used on that meeting date that they need satisfied. And so if they're met with this litany of, you can't call us until December 15th, because, like that's when we're open to the public, it seems to me like the public doesn't really need to see these three things. This might be the way we operate, and if they really want to know, this is why we can't get back to them until December 15th to tell them which room they'll be in the community center. And like you said, you're able to accommodate them most times. So why give them this kind of, it looks like a runaround.
Well, because
and
people
they just
say,
wanna,
why didn't you tell me? We didn't know.
Well, they just want to know that, that on December 15th, they'll find out which room they're assigned to.
But the case may be that there's no room available.
But it doesn't sound like that's what's happening.
In practice right now, but as the programs are continuing to expand and grow, it may be a short time before that becomes a problem. But I think the frustration is not just that because we were talking December 15th, but as we've now booked, let's say we got our reservation in on the 16th and we booked a date in January, February, and March, but the group can't know that they're going to meet again in April and where and when until, what, March 15th? Or after March 15th?
Yes.
Yeah. And again, it's, I wonder if, at the minimum, if we don't use a sliding window so that you're doing it, you can book a room, 3 months in advance or whatever. Not have to
I don't
wait
know
for the
how
last.
else to present the information. The fact is that the
Why not on
programs-
January 15th be able to book a room in March or in April? In April,
You can do that. Any day after December 15th, you can book a room all the way through March 30th, any day.
Okay, but come January 15th, why can't I book a room in April?
Because we haven't done our spring schedule of classes. We haven't booked the rooms. Remember the example I gave about the dance room? You could book the dance room, and then when we say, oh, we've got a new yoga instructor, oh, we have a rental in the room, that's not serving the community as a whole. That's serving the one group.
It just seems odd to me. It seems odd that you'd have this, like from December 15th to January 1st, that you'd have anything of substance being decided. Like, how could you decide that, okay, January 2nd, we're going to have this class, and it's going to be really well attended, and we need, up until December 15th to make that decision. I don't see how you would do the outreach, the publicity necessary to make that January 2nd event a success.
No, our brochure goes out in the December newsletter. I mean, you pick any of these months. Our brochure has a day that it comes out in the newsletter. We accept registrations depending on which cycle it is, the minute that it goes in the mail. Now, it may be that one of the programs doesn't have enough people registered. We take it out of the schedule, out of the software. It's now open and available to the public.
Yeah, but you've already ticked people off because you
That's
prolonged
why I
the
said it's an
agony.
issue. We're ticking people off. Some people,
It doesn't seem to me that you could have a successful program that you decided to on December 14th, that you decided was going to happen in early January. I don't see how you could have a successful program in early January.
well, we don't book the first week of January. That's just us. We start our programs, like September, for example, we wait till the third week, till school starts, kids get their schedule. That's when we have our first program, the third week of
I
September.
think we've sort of exhausted this issue, and I think there are, before everybody leaves, we haven't sort of gotten to what I hear from people as being the really most contentious issue about the use and rental policies, and we really need to talk about that. The thing that I hear like Terry does, that people are concerned about what they have to pay for rooms. I'm also hearing from people that they're concerned that they have to pay for rooms for things that they consider to be sort of official groups, but groups that don't fit our criteria, that they feel that are things that they're doing for purposes, for community purposes or for city purposes. And I think, I will just tell you what I hear. There's concern about why people get charged for what are not personal use of rooms. In other words, I think people are not unhappy having to pay for rooms, and maybe this is who Colleen's hearing from, to pay for a room on an hourly basis if they're using it for, say, a child's birthday party, or they're using it for, they're having a group of friends for some kind of a private event. But people feel differently if there's an organization that they belong to that doesn't meet one of the organizational usage criteria, that they have to then pay for the use of the facility when they say, I'm a city resident, and what's the purpose of having this community facility if community residents can't use it for community purposes? So I hear that, and I think that's an issue of our sort of setting up the criteria for what's a community group, that we need to take a look at that. I think that we really do need to simplify it. The second thing is the issue of sort of last-minute reservations. The way we've set it up, it makes it difficult for somebody to just say, well, our group was bumped out of, such and such a place, and we'd like to see if there's some room in the community center for our group tonight, understanding that the community center might be full. Unless that group is sort of is an entity that the staff is already familiar with, we don't have a structure really to make that happen. The time, and Deborah's familiar with this, the only time that I got involved in this was an attempt to make a reservation for like a day or two ahead of time, which, if we had no room, that would have been, I think, fine. But there was room in the community center. They did, I think, verify that. But they couldn't use it because they weren't on the list, and there wasn't a way for them to get on the list within a day or two period of time. And it sort of seems like the council, through policy, has sort of set up this very complicated structure and then sort of imposed it on the staff, and there's not really a way for sort of common sense decisions to be able to be made in a way that facilitates the use of the building. I mean, I think probably the space that this group ended up using would have just gone empty. So it wasn't a question of our losing income. But the council have imposed such a complicated structure on the staff that it makes it difficult for them, and it frustrates members of the community who want to use the community space for community purposes. And I think we need to think about sort of simplifying things a little bit. We sort of have two contrary things that we want to do. One is to make money off the building, which is a good goal, and the other is to facilitate its use by the community that's basically paid for the building to be built. And we sort of haven't dealt with the fact that those two things are a bit working at cross purposes, and we've put together this very complicated structure and then sort of said to the staff, you have to work within the structure, but on the other hand, you have to make common sense decisions, and that's sort of not possible. And
I'm happy to look at simplifying this. I haven't been happy with it pretty much any of the times that we...
And, you know, I don't have another alternative. I don't know if you all have thought about ways that you could propose to us that would make it simpler, particularly for you to use, because I think I wouldn't like. Can I just finish this? I wouldn't like to put the staff in the position of always having to deal with grumpy residents because people don't understand the policies and don't understand the rationale for them. I don't like putting staff in that position. On the other hand, I don't like having to say to residents, well, this is why we're doing it, and they say, but that doesn't make sense to me, and it's sort of like, well, I agree in your situation it doesn't make sense, but this is sort of our policy.
Yeah, I think given the lateness of the hour, I don't think we're probably going to make a lot of headway. I think the comment that I would make is this policy is the most complicated I have ever seen in my career. I think Deborah and I had talked about that when we adopted it. I think we're now at a point that if we are attempting to carve out even more exceptions to try to determine what's an appropriate community use, and I think ultimately that's a value judgment. I think when we were going through this, I think we felt comfortable as a staff saying that you have established neighborhood associations that are on a recognized list maintained by the city clerk's office. We tried to identify groups that the city has historically had a partnership with, such as the Folk Festival, and that we have financially supported. And then I think the default one was to look at groups that actually have some type of defined standing, which would be a 501c3, a recognized nonprofit, and at least that there be an emphasis on serving the Tacoma Park community. I think the situation the mayor is alluding to was not someone that fell into that category. And I don't think I want to see the staff put in the position of trying to determine whether someone who calls up that they should know their name or that making a value judgment as to whether or not their purpose is beneficial. I think anyone who's affiliated with many groups in the community feel that they serve a worthwhile purpose, and I think they do. I think if we're going to look at ways to carve out even more exceptions, quite frankly, then I think we should just default to the other end of the extreme, which is to say that if you're a resident that you have the right to use space for free and the staff is not trying to keep a constantly changing list and figuring out what categories people fall within. You know, if someone is a resident, yes, we could sit there as a staff and go look in the room, but to try to have the staff be put in the position of trying to judge whether or not they're talking about environmental issues that arguably serve the community or it's some other purpose, I think starts putting the staff in an untenable position unless we're going to have staff whose specific job is to walk around the building and not trying to be facetious, but stare in the room and try to make an assessment. I just don't think that's logical.
Can I make a proposal? I've had this written down the entire meeting, but if you look at the second bullet on this list of the criteria, if you just change the first two sentences so that it was a not-for-profit activity whose mission directly benefits the city of Tacoma Park or Tacoma Park residents, then you get that organization to fill out whatever form this is that you want them to provide a listing of members and some statement of how it's benefited the city of Tacoma Park. The most that we'll risk is that we provide 11 free rentals to this person for 1 year. Mm-hmm. And then the next year, they will, be removed. But I think that's so much easier. You just say you have to register your group, write down your contact information, give us a listing of your members, tell us what your activity is going to be, and that doesn't seem like a really huge risk to me. But I've been in favor of something very simple all along, something that fits this community because this community is the one that supported building the center.
Are you talking about
instead, we have this incredibly detailed listing, and I think, it should be just a very few things. It should not be a commercial interest. It you know, should be someone who's willing to fill out a form. We're done. I mean, we're done. Like, why do we want to have so many barriers to this? This is 11 free rentals. That's all. We're not booking the place for 365 days, you know, 24 hours a day. This is just 11 free rentals. And, you know, if they're trying to use the space for 10 hours, well, that doesn't seem like a nonprofit activity. I think they'd have trouble filling out that form. So, you know, I just think it could be much, much simpler. I agree with the mayor that it should be, you know, simplified, easy for the staff to use, not irritating to the public, not making us have to defend a policy that's very difficult to defend. People call me and I say, this group was born in Tacoma Park. It should definitely, you know, have 11 free rentals a year. What's the problem?
Let me make sure I understand. You're talking about the only criterion a group would have to meet to be on the list of groups that can get 11 free rentals is that they would fill out a form saying that they were, basically, that they met that they were a nonprofit, that they were composed primarily of Tacoma Park residents.
No, I don't think that needs to be on there. I think if the person, you know, the attachment parenting group was started here, it has a core group of families here, but if they have people who come, I mean, they don't have a membership. They just put out a notice that we're having an attachment parenting meeting. If people come from Silver Spring because they saw it at Mark's Kitchen, if people come from D.C. because, you know, they were shopping in Old Town, that's great. And then it's just a group. If we want them to, you know, list their core members, that's fine, but membership suggests that you pay dues, that there's a board. These groups don't have that.
So you're talking about any group. I guess
what I said, the language I said was not-for-profit activity. They don't have to be an organization. Not-for-profit activity whose mission directly benefits the city of Tacoma Park or Tacoma Park residents. Get rid of true nonprofit. I mean, how many true nonprofits are there? It's very expensive to do that. So, you know, ditch the true. So by any measure.
So if somebody is like the Silver Spring Tenants Association, they could book a room here for free.
If they can tell us how it directly benefits the city of Tacoma Park and Tacoma Park residents, I'd like to see that form.
Mayor Porter? Could I suggest that we not try to, actually, I think Joy's on the right track, absolutely, but that we not try to come up with the solution tonight and maybe let the staff come back to us with some.
I mean, that's been the solution all along.
Just let Colleen finish.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. But you know, it's 11:30 and
it came up at 11:20.
I understand.
I know. What I'm so frustrated by is that when this does come up, there is so much resistance to simplifying it, and you know, it probably won't be put on the agenda anytime in the near future.
Okay, but I'm concerned that
so 6 more months. We might take this up.
I just don't want to come up with a solution.
I regret my decision to go last in terms of the council members who spoke, because this was my intention to bring this up at the beginning, but the discussion went on very long. I agree it's too late to do it, but I didn't want us to leave without making sure that we dealt with what I thought was the most important issue in terms of the facilities use and rental. I agree that making it simpler is a good idea. That Joy's suggestion may be the start of it. I think that having the staff come back to us perhaps with an elaboration of that is good, but I think that the structure that we have set up is too complex. I agree with Barb that adding another exception to it is not the way to go. I think we need to simplify it, and I'm happy to have staff come back to us with a recommendation. But I think that we need to give them the direction. If we want to make it much less restrictive than it is now, we're going to lose revenues. As long as we're okay with that, and as long I am, because I think that letting people who are Tacoma Park residents do that, I think the only thing that I would add would be that it served primarily Tacoma Park residents.
But if you don't think people who fill out this form have integrity, then, you know, it's all over. I mean, there's just a certain amount of trust that we have to have in our society. If someone fills out this form, puts their name and phone number on there, signs the bottom that, you know, they have answered these statements correctly, okay, and it says Silver Spring citizen something something, you know, hopefully they filled in the paragraph to help us understand how that Silver Spring so-and-so benefits the city of Tacoma Park. I'm simply saying is, if you make, first of all, if you make it be an organization, then you've lost a lot of groups. If you make it have to, like, declare their membership being comprised primarily of Tacoma Park residents, you get people playing games, okay? We don't want any of those things.
Okay, I think, Colleen, did you get your question, did you get your last comment in?
I just wanted to say that, you know, after only talking about it for 10 minutes, I just didn't want to go forward. I did want to make one last comment, and that is to say to Deborah, thank you so much for coming. You know, as a council member, people call us all the time with all of the things that go wrong, and I think sometimes when department heads come before us, we're ready with our list of everything that goes wrong, and we just sort of hand it to you, and I'm sure that's really overwhelming. But lots of great things happen in the recreation department. I have talked to staff members who were very enthusiastic about the kids, who love the kids. The woman who ran that summer program, the adventure program, I met them down on the mall one time, clearly very engaged with the kids. They love what they do. The woman who was on the desk the weekend that Piper's Party was new to the desk. She was great, really helpful to us, trying to make things work out. There are a lot of great things that are happening, and I've been really impressed with just how the programming is just sort of ramped up. You know, it started with a changeover, but it ramped up. And the last thing I want to say is that I think to many people in Tacoma Park, the recreation department really embodies what Tacoma Park residents think of when they think about the values of Tacoma Park, and so it's incredibly important to them, and they really want it to be right. And that's why I think we hear about every little thing that happens, because it is so incredibly important to them.
And we also hear that a lot is right, and, you know, we focus and concentrate on the things where we'd like to see better, but, you know, you've shown just in your slide presentation tonight a whole lot that is right, and so I just second what Councilmember Clay said, and I just wanted to point out that I do support the idea of simplification, and tonight we had 2 items on the agenda. I would like to suggest we only have 1 next week.
Deborah, how much revenue did you say there was in 6 months?
$81.50.
What?
$8,150 in 6 months. So if we forego all revenue for a year, we're talking $16,000.
Yeah.
Is all this hassle worth $16,000?
No, it's not.
Okay, all right, I think we've given the staff direction.
Thank you.
But we're past that.
There's nothing else, we're adjourned.
God.
Thank you.